It's about to go up, break them like internet. Goofies try to run up, we leave them in the dead.
You say, okay, I have a lot of money, but you have no money unless you take profits.
When the first ever spot ETF was created for gold 10x.
And the only thing I really knew was Bitcoin at the time, so I just invested very heavily into that. Rode it all the way up.
What's up?
My name is Jeff. Even the creators have said it's going to be the predecessor of CBDC.
What that taught me was that I need to be self-sufficient.
A solid DCA investment strategy, and pretend the red sell button doesn't even exist.
We about to go up like.
Hey guys, so we're here, DGen Insights in the house, right? We got WaLLrus with us, ready to go. We have a liquid loans deep dive. We really dove into this one. There's some really important things we discovered about this. This is going to be absolutely huge. I am extremely bullish on this one, and so is Tracker. So Tracker, I mean, what have you got for us? You're obviously extremely excited about this.
Yeah, absolutely appreciate that, Nate. So first of all, I wanted to let everybody know, we already interviewed WaLLrus previous to this, so I'd like anybody to go back and watch that video because that was a really good discussion we had with WaLLrus. We wanted to have them back on once we go through the whole protocol and got get adapted to all the material and soak it in, because there's a lot to take in. And what we were trying to accomplish today was doing a deep dive into liquid loans. We went through all their material, videos, white papers, all the stuff they had on their website to really understand the entire protocol. And there's a lot of little nuances you need to be aware of, some gotchas and stuff, but really, they're not really gotchas. It's just things that I think people are not going to pay attention to the details. Like most people don't pay attention to the details. And unfortunately, you need to understand how this protocol works. So our job was take all that information, let's put it into an easy, digestible format where people can get kind of really up to speed on what's going on with liquid loans, how WaLLrus here to jump in and maybe correct us and steer us in the right direction if we didn't hit quite the target on what the team is trying to accomplish on a certain section that we're going to cover. But at the same time, we want to then steer you guys to Liquid Loans' materials on their website so you can really get into really deep into some of the videos they did and some of the white papers and a lot of the formulas that you might want to nerd out to really dive into, like base rate, for example. If you want to understand how that's all calculated, we can do that. But this is really to get you guys up to speed quickly on what's going on in Liquid Loans. How can you leverage it? How can you use it? And of course, once again, like we always state, this is not financial advice. This is entertainment purposes only. But with that being said, WaLLrus, appreciate you coming back on with us.
Man, it's my pleasure. You guys are a ton of fun. I love going through the deep dives. I also kind of like doing some of the shows that kind of have like a tailored audience. One of the things is like, as you guys said, like there's so much going on with LL. When someone's like, what's LL? Where do we start, right? When we kind of have like a more of a tailored audience, we've gotten in and hung out, now everybody kind of, reads each other's mind a bit, and then we can, kind of get into things that are a little more succinct, more helpful. So it's an absolute pleasure. Always appreciate the invitations. And yeah, this ought to be a lot of fun, guys.
Absolutely. All right, let's just dive right in. Let's go ahead and jump in. Nate, you want to show off the screen? There we go. So this is a nice little screenshot of their actual Liquid Loans website. I want to put it here on the splash page here to get it going. When you get here, their website everything looks really professional. Their videos, their content, everything is really, really sharp. Looks really good. They did a hell of a job. So we're going to dive into it. So let's just go in and first of all, let's talk about the outline and what we're going to be covering today. We're going to basically do a discussion on what the heck liquid loans even is. We're going to have a high-level explainer video that they did a great job of. It's a 4-minute, quick, high-level video, very professionally done to go over the entire protocol and how it all functions and works. Discuss the various cryptocurrencies that are used throughout this protocol and how they're going to be, created or leveraged in the system. Then there's 4 other main areas that users are going to be able to, interface in with the protocol, how they're going to utilize it. Then we're going to actually say, after we've talked about it, that's great. Now let's go freaking jump into the testnet v4, connect up to it, and then we're going to go through that to show you the actual interface. And they've already come out with a great little tour that really simplified that. So we want to go through that process to show you, and it tells you how to use their interface to the entire DApp. Get accustomed to that, and then how do you actually do the things that we're talking about and actually show you how it's going to be done. And then of course we're going to talk about some possible strategies, and then we got a lot of Q&A at the end that WaLLrus, we'll try to give WaLLrus some questions here so he can clear up some questions that we might have. All right guys, so that's what we're going to dive into. Let's get going.
And I'm looking
All right.
forward to the strategies. I know there's some money printers you can make with liquid loans. And when I watched that little 4-minute video, this was kind of my introduction to liquid loans. And I was like, oh, wow, this is something else. Like, I'm actually, I think it's my favorite of the new ones, like Tetra and all those other ones were coming out at the time. But I was looking at this one like, hey, this there's something here for money printer wise.
Yeah, and if you're already in the ecosystem with the Pulse chain, with Pulse and Hex and PulseX and all those ecosystem coins, rest assured, this is going to add a lot of value to the system. This is going to, you're going to see it. Let's just dive in. Let's just get into it because you're going to see it. We got to get through all the understanding of what the heck is going on before we can get to the, basically the alpha. So let's get in here and start understanding this. If this is the first time you've seen this, we're going to do a deep dive. So hold on, here we go. All right. Liquid loans, they tout this very much. It's the first decentralized lending protocol exclusive from Pulse chain. It's only going to be on Pulse chain. Here's the thing, for those hexagons out there that are familiar with staking, all right, this should also sound very familiar with you. This is a finished product. There's no admin keys. It's governance free. Once this system is out there, it's out there. There is no you working with a middleman or any type of central exchange or entity. It's you making basically your coins using primarily Pulse. There's a few other coins we'll get into, and then you are now interfacing with the protocol with smart contracts. So that's what we're going to have to understand. All you need is a MetaMask wallet. You can use other wallets, but primarily I think MetaMask is probably the one to be used. WaLLrus, what other wallets, or is the team pretty much any wallets, or is it limited to just certain ones that are working with the protocol?
Nope. So as of right now, we're going to go through and get Wallet Connect V2 up here pretty shortly. That became kind of the standard as we were in the middle of some of the audit and things like that. So it kind of wasn't a priority, but we want to make sure that as we've gone through now. So anything that supports, Wallet Connect V1, which is basically everything. And then we'll have V2 up shortly. Again, that stuff just comes on the front end, and there'll also be multiple front ends. Now, that's probably what we dig in today, but multiple front ends, every wallet, real DeFi. You don't have to ask. It's all there, everything.
Nice. All right, so here's this 4-minute video. We're going to go ahead and click and launch this because I want everybody to watch this to understand it, because this is a great little presentation and walk you through. Like I said, very professionally done. All right, Nate, you want to go ahead and launch this?
Liquid Loans is the first truly decentralized lending protocol built specifically and exclusively for Pulse chain. Its operations are immutable, non-custodial, and governance-free. It's a finished product with no admin keys. The Liquid Loans protocol was developed to allow owners of Pulse a method of extracting value from their holdings without the need to ever sell. By locking up Pulse and minting USDL, a Pulse holder can take a 0% interest-free loan against their holdings on a timeless repayment schedule. The Liquid Loans protocol has 2 native tokens, USDL and Loan. USDL is an algorithmic stablecoin that aims to always be worth $1. Many stablecoins today are fiat-backed, but USDL is different. It doesn't rely on dollars in a bank account. Instead, USDL is minted when users deposit Pulse as collateral that has been locked into individual smart contracts called vaults. Loan is the secondary token issued by the protocol. It captures the fee revenue that is generated by the system and incentivizes early adopters. You earn Loan by providing USDL to the stability pool in exchange for rewards. You can stake your loan tokens to earn the revenue paid for borrowing or redeeming USDL. So, how can you benefit from using the protocol? Well, there are 4 main journeys you can take. 1. Borrow. As a borrower, you can take a loan against your existing Pulse. To do this, you deposit your Pulse into a contract called a vault, which in turn mints the USDL stablecoin. The minimum collateral ratio you can lock up is 110%. However, a ratio of 150% or more is strongly recommended. There is a one-off borrowing fee of between 0.5% and 5% depending on demand for loans. Use your USDL for a variety of personal uses, or reinvest into the system to provide stability and take advantage of another journey on the ecosystem. 2. Earn. As a holder of USDL, you can earn income by providing stability to the Liquid Loans ecosystem. Invest and achieve a return on your USDL using gains earned through liquidation events, plus incentives earned in the form of loan tokens. Liquidations redistribute the liquidated pulse to existing stability holders in proportion to the amount of USDL they have in the stability pool. Possible returns as a stability provider are known to be between 10% and 30% APR. 3. Stake. As a holder of loan, your loan tokens can be staked for rewards. Staking is a common way for users and holders of native tokens to earn interest on their holdings. Holders of loan tokens can stake their tokens in the ecosystem and achieve returns known to be in excess of 20% APR. Earnings are generated from borrowings and redemption fees and are provided in the same proportion as the amount you have staked in the staking pool. 4. Redeem. To redeem Pulse, you simply provide the appropriate amount of USDL. The protocol allows you to exchange one USDL stablecoin for $1 worth of Pulse. Redeeming is a huge benefit to the system, as it allows the Pulse holder to extract value and helps keep the USDL value pegged in the overall market. Liquid Loan's core purpose is to support the creation, growth, and adoption of a more secure, trustless, and decentralized financial infrastructure that is community-owned and brings greater stability and transparency to the Pulse chain ecosystem. Join the movement and see what's possible for you. liquidloans.io.
All right, so we just saw the entire presentation of the 4-minute video on the high level that the team from Liquid Loans put together. You should at least have a good understanding of how the protocol works, at least an idea to it. So now let's actually dive into some of those sections so you can understand more of what was going on with the details. All right. First, you obviously in those protocols, you saw some coins flying around and stuff, right? Well, for anybody who's been on the Pulse chain, we all know what Pulse chain is. For those who aren't, it is the L1 for the Pulse chain network. Okay, any transaction fees, anything that's happening on Pulse chain, Pulse is the primary coin that's going to be used out to that entire network. Think of Pulse chain. For those who know Ethereum, think of the Ethereum network. You got ETH. That's the same thing with Pulse chain. Okay, now we're going to get in USDL. This is going to be the stable coin that Liquid Loans is generating through this opportunity to, users, will deposit PLS and in return you get this USDL. Okay. Once you go through that, there is a parity. Now, the thing that when I saw this, I saw the algorithmic, stable coin, but this is a hard peg mechanism that's being used for this USDL coin. Because anytime I heard algorithmic, stable coin, I'm thinking, oh crap, these have gone off the rails a lot of times, right? That's like a red flag. But it's interesting enough, this is not correlated to the US fiat dollars. This is allocated to the Pulse that's actually being deposited into the system in order to mint the USDL. Good thing about here, now the way you obtain this USDL is through borrowing and staking within the Liquid Loans protocol. We'll dive into that. You can also be able to buy this on dexes such as like, PulseX and on the open market as well. WaLLrus, did you want to talk a little bit about the algorithmic, how you guys are using hard pegs? I know that's one of those gotchas. People hear that and like, oh, here we go again. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk on that.
100%. You highlighted those things, and it's worth jumping into. This is something I want people to have that reaction, right? So now again, we'll explain why LL is a little different, but you should react that way. Like that is that's what we want, right? Like we want people to always be very, very critical of these things. And when you hear algorithmic stablecoin, like the hair on my head stands up. Like that's something to be concerned with. Like that's an issue, right? So it is algorithmic in the sense that there's an algorithm and it's coded in how it handles it. But the big difference is sort of colloquially when we say algorithmic, what they mean is there's no backing and there's this Do Kwon or some kind of voodoo behind this thing, right? So the way it works in LL and with USDL, the main mechanism there, and as you put it there, kind of that hard peg, is the redemption. So the dollar is like a measuring stick in the system. So one USDL is worth $1 worth of Pulse. So you can't have a stable coin without redemptions. So the way the redemptions work is if you have a USDL, regardless of whatever the price is in the LPs, you can come redeem it for $1 worth of Pulse. So the way you kind of get this parity is if it goes above $1, you're able to mint USDL as you laid out there for $1 still, right? So let's just say it's $1.20. That's what its price is in the LPs. Well, I can mint it for $1. So if it's above peg, you're going to see people start to mint more and then go spend it, right? And then that'll naturally start to push that price. And then if it goes below, let's say it's at 80 cents. Well, if you'll let me buy something for 80 cents here that I can go over here and get $1 for, I'll take every one you've got. So that redemption is what really maintains that parity. But you'll see that on both sides, where when it's above, you'll see more minting and people will take advantage of that through again, kind of a indirect arbitrage. And then when it goes below, you'll see literal arbitrage where people want to use that redemption. So those are the main mechanics. So again, it is algorithmic, but again, different than what we would call like an algorithmic stable coin.
That's really impressive, the way you put that. I actually loved it, because it really simplifies, I would say, how stable coins tend to work, because oftentimes, people get a little bit confused about that. I know I did originally when I was learning about this stuff, right? So algorithmic, as soon as you're losing peg and it's becoming too expensive, people start selling it into something else, right? And then from there, as soon as it starts getting, it starts losing its peg and being less expensive, right? That's when they'll be buying it into something else. Sorry. The pulse, they would buy the pulse into they would buy pulse from their stable coin into the less expensive stable, right? And then they would put the more expensive stable, they would put the pulse into the more expensive stable, correct?
So you can arbitrage it between the LPs, but the more direct ones is the redemption. So you can go through there and you could redeem it. And essentially, if you were, say, holding any of the other stables, then you could just be buying USDL while it's below peg. But the main mechanism is that you have that redemption in the system. So there's $1 worth of pulse that backs up every USDL. So anytime that it goes below that $1, you're able to go and redeem it right there in the dApp. So you just take it, redeem, and you'll collect that pulse. So I always kind of liken this to kind of like back when we talked about like gold-backed dollars or a gold-backed currency. If it's that there's gold truly behind this thing, right? So that's the way the USDO works, is the gold in this case is PLS. And so again, if somebody was going to let you spend it for more than $1, you take advantage of that, you mint more. If it's below $1, then you can take advantage of it and go through and redeem.
Yeah, and it's basically, it looks like this, everybody.
Yeah,
so
well,
that's
one of the
algorithmic.
strategies. Yeah, that's one of the strategies we'll be talking about, is the arbitrage strategy as well. Absolutely. Okay, appreciate that, WaLLrus and Nate. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, because I know that was something that a lot of people probably had concerns about. All right, so now the other thing you're going to be you'll be able to get is loan. The loan token is obtained by basically taking USDL and put it into a stability pool, and you'll get it that way. You'll also be able to buy it on the open markets as well. Consider it. Now, here's the thing, though. I'm considering kind of like an incentive token, but with functionality behind it. It's not just an incentive token. Okay. Now, WaLLrus, I'd like you to kind of like elaborate a little bit on that, because I know the people who sacrificed are going to be getting the loan token, correct? And I was just curious to know how that works, or if maybe or maybe not they don't get it. I don't know.
So the loan token has a couple of really neat features. So early on, it does have some of those incentives that you're laying out, where you can get it as an emissions through the stability pool. So the stability pool, which we'll touch on here in a bit, but essentially it has an extra emission early on, and it has a halvening. So it's meant to sort of kickstart the stability pool and get that function, nice and thick early on. So the loan gets paid out there. And then you also have it in the LP rewards, which again, that'll be one of the strategies. We'll dig in a little more. So those are the places that you can get extra incentives for loan. But the loan is what allows you to basically get yield in the form of the fees from starting, opening a vault, and those redemptions. So those fees get paid out to the loan holder. So that's the way to basically take advantage of all the kind of economic activity on the platform.
All right, sounds good. All right, so let's take a look at what that video was presenting to you, but let's break this down into some sections. So when I was looking at this, I could understand what each section was doing, and I saw this information. I'm like, okay, it makes sense. But then I kept hearing borrowing, earning, staking. So I wanted to label what the sections were that they were talking about, because I wasn't quite sure. But this is basically all that's happening here. So when you're borrowing, and we're going to dive into each one of these individually so we can see what's going on here. But you can see how the ecosystem flows. Pulse chain comes out of your wallet, goes into a vault, smart contract gets created. The user then receives back USDL. At that point, you can decide what you want to do with it. And then we're going to go through this. So let's go ahead and dive into the next section, because we're going to talk about specifically what's going on with borrowing. Then we'll dive into earnings, then into staking. All right, borrowing. Like I said, you're taking the Pulse. The user is going to connect your wallet. You're going to then deposit your Pulse into a vault, which is a smart contract, similar to how smart contracts with any hexagon that did staking. It's the same thing. It is a contract that's bonding to that address that was setting up the contract to do the Pulse. Then you, at that point, you can redeem it at any time you want. There's no time that you can't redeem it. It's 0% loan, so you don't have to worry about any type of schedule payments or anything like that. Users will then redeem their Pulse by providing the USD back to the vault at any time. Now, I got an asterisk here because we're going to talk about, I don't want to get into it yet, but the recovery mode we'll talk about later. But there's a caveat there in the recovery mode, and once you understand that, you'll understand why that's in place. And then of course, when you do this, you get the USDL. At this point, you can hold that, you could swap it, you can, DCA into at some point into Pulse. When if Pulse were to pull back, you could use it for that kind of strategy, whatnot. But bottom line is, you can also then take it and stake it and earn it, which we'll talk about that as well. Now, some of the requirements here, the trick that I was seeing on some of the things was you'd have to have 2,000 USDL. That's the minimum requirement you'll need in order to do any type of, creating a vault here. So if you don't have at least 2,000 USDL, to draw out, then you're not going to be able to do this, because that's the minimum amount you need. You also need to have, it's one per wallet. Now, you can create multiple wallets now if you want to. You can have multiple wallets, and you can do this because, like I said, you're not contracting with anything. It's just a smart contract or a system protocol that's live. The other thing you're going to need to understand is there's this 200 USDL fee that you're going to need to have when you create this contract with the vault. Now this, you get it back once it's done, but this is in place to handle a lot of overhead expenses. So if this vault goes into being liquidated, we're going to talk about that, then that covers the overhead expenses of that process. And then of course there's also the fees that, the transaction fees from Pulse. So that's basically how it breaks down. So the fees would be the transaction fees, the borrowing rate, and the 200 USDL. Let's go in and take a look at how that borrowing fee is being calculated. The borrowing fee is always going to be this 0.5% plus the base rate. The base rate, to get into some of these details, and I like to have WaLLrus talk a little bit about this, but the base rate is always changing because this is the variable that can change. The simple way that I looked at this was, it's a simple supply and demand. If everybody is trying to get loans out, it's going to drive up the borrowing fees because supply and demand. It's like, it makes the world go round, right? The other process that you can think of this is the vice versa. So let's say no one's borrowing. Well, then the fees are going to go down. And that recovery mode that I was talking about that we will dive into is the best time you can get it, because the rates are actually at zero, because they're trying to bring in more borrowers to stimulate the system. And then those borrowing fees that they do get generated here will get detail. WaLLrus, did you want to talk about some of that?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that work out there. So part of that ebb and flow on that fee there is also, again, around overall system health. Now, again, we'll dig into that, like as you said, with the recovery mode, but part of that is to help almost like maintain some of that USDL as well. So you want to, like, again, encourage borrowing, and you'll see people take advantage of that whenever again, a recovery mode is pretty rare, but we'll definitely want to work through it. But it all comes around like basically maintaining USDL. So USDL is sort of the bell of the ball in a lot of ways, even though we have all these other functions we're trying to take advantage of. Most of these sort of caveats on where we're changing either the fees there on redemptions, it's all about, again, kind of maintaining the health for the USDL, because that ends up kind of being the tool that so many people end up using, again, to take advantage of all these things. So the fees, again, they're extremely low, even 5% when you're talking about zero interest. Still, it doesn't cap. Again, it's very, very minuscule, relative to what you would expect in, similar protocols or having interest or any of those things. But it does, again, gives that ebb and flow to help maintain, kind of that influx and outflux of USDL.
All right, appreciate that. Let's just look at a simple example here. I've got a few more, but I just wanted to show this one that the Liquid Loans team had put together. So let's say if the base rate is at 0.5%, okay? The borrower is trying to create a new vault by depositing 400,000 Pulse, okay? Wants to draw just 4,000 USDL on this. We'll talk about ratios here on the next slide, but for this argument's sake, just to see the numbers and how they play out. So the 200 USDL is going to be is part of the fees. You're charged 1% fee because remember, it's always going to start off at 0.5% plus the base rate. If the base rate's 0.5 plus 0.5, that gets you that 1% fee here. And then on the 400 USDL that you're actually getting out for locking up your pulse, the borrower will attain that 4,000 USD. But in order to incur this debt, meaning your debt now is going to be this 4,000, 4,000 that USDL you borrowed, the 200 which USDL that you'll get back at the time you pay it off, and then the 40 USDL, which is all that is the transaction fees that are being incorporated. So in order to do this, to repay back your loan, you just have to pay back the 4,040 USDL to get that 400,000 pulse back out of the system. In this specific example, here's what I'm talking about. Now that 200 USDL, you'll get that automatically. That's why you don't have to pay it back. It's upfront in case you get liquidated. If so, those fees are going to be absorbed at that point, and we'll dive into what that looks like too. But does this sound pretty clear to you?
Yeah, that's a great way to lay out there. Like I said, essentially you have, again, that totality there. So you have whatever you actually borrow, the 200, which is that reserve as a liquidation incentive, and then obviously that base rate.
Yep, exactly. And
So
we'll talk about these.
So what we're looking at then at this point is like the reason why the rate is at zero, right? The interest rate is at zero, is because of the borrowing fees themselves, or is it the idea that somebody's going to get liquidated, and so therefore we don't need the rate and able to actually make money? Is that the idea?
It's actually basically a combination of all of those things. So part of it is the idea of that collateral is that it's meant to back up the USDL, right? So the thing that's interesting is your vault, right? So we'll get into the little caveats with recovery mode, but when you open up a vault, again, we'll use this example here. You put up 400,000 pulse and you're pulling out 4,000 USDL. Does that cost anybody outside of it? It doesn't cost anything, right? Like there's no overhead. We don't have all these extraneous things. This is DeFi, right? So who's to charge, right? Like you put up the collateral, you held it, the USDL's out. So the only time the system needs to do anything is to maintain that collateral around USDL. So there's no need to charge anything or have these paybacks as long as that collateral is maintained. So as long as we're in an over collateralized environment, there's no need for an interest charge. So the borrowing again goes into play about, again, maintaining some of the USDL's peg and, having some payouts in the system. But again, the idea being that because this is DeFi, because it's over collateralized, that's where there's no need for this repayment schedule. But that is why you need liquidation. So these things all sort of are all a balancing act a bit.
I see.
Oh, yeah.
It kind of sounds to me that, and we'll get more into that. Just to kind of sum it up, though, it's basically people getting wrecked will pay for your interest rates.
You'll see. That's part of one of the strategies. We'll get in there. All right. So let's talk about what some of these terms mean. Okay. So MCR, minimum collateral ratio. So when you create a vault, you're making a smart contract with the user and Liquid Loans. There's a minimum minimum collateral ratio rate at this 110%. The other thing you need to understand is ICR, which is the individual collateral ratio. Okay. Don't get these two mixed up. Bottom line is MCR is basically the minimum for the system. That always stays at 110%. Your ICR is when you create the loan, or you create your vault, you basically are creating a loan, you're giving your pulse, you're getting USDL. You're deciding how much USDL to take out of the system for your pulse. That's going to create this ICR percentage. This is extremely critical. I can't stress that enough. And they did a pretty good job of warning people about this as well. TCR is the total collateral ratio. That's how much all the debt, all the loans that have gone out in the entire system. So MCR is very low. The other thing that you want to keep in mind is the 100. So there's certain numbers that I've kind of been ingrained in my head going through this. And that is that 110%. I'm not even, me personally as a user, I'm not even looking at 110%. I'm not even looking at 150% ICR, because they have risk levels of when you create a loan or a vault. When you create that loan, it's going to give you this ICR percentage. And if your percentage is anywhere below 150, that's considered a risky loan. Okay, you have to understand this. We're going to dive into that. But what we're saying here is, let's take a look at one of these examples. If the user takes out USDL, it's a typo here, a value of the pulse in the form of USDL, so it's USD value of pulse in the form of USDL, you can get up to 90.91% of your pulse that you borrowed against it. So let's look at one of these examples here. So if pulse is at 0.01%, hey, we're all doing very well then. But let's just say in this example, it's at 0.01, 1 cent, and you deposit 3 million pulse. You decide to borrow 10,000 USDL. Then your ICR would be 300%. And here's a simple calculations on how you get there. Okay, that's exactly how you would do it. And the same thing for example 2, the difference is instead of only taking out 10,000, you're taking out 25,000, you're getting a little greedy. Now you pushed your ICR down to 120. Okay. We're going to talk about liquidations, but bottom line, what you need to be aware of, and the team really reiterated this a lot, you're going to have times where the system can go into like a rare case of recovery mode, or if you get low enough on your ICR, you become a high risk of getting liquidated. So the key here is, and I put it here specifically, do not get greedy. The lower your ICR, the higher probability your butt's getting liquidated. I can't stress that enough. These are the things that people who get into the system are not going to be paying attention to, and they're going to get wrecked. And that's just how the system works. So when you borrow at 150%, you might be thinking, hey, I'm okay. I'm above 150%. Like I got more. I should be okay. But if pulse price goes down, so is your ICR percentage going to drop too at the same time. Thus, now you thought you were safe. All of a sudden, you're not. So we'll get into some of the strategies here. But the key here is these numbers, these percentage numbers, when you're creating your vault, don't get stupid with this. Do not take a loan out at 110% ICR percentage. You're probably going to get liquidated that day. So just be very careful when you do that. WaLLrus, would you like to add some of that?
Yeah, just a little bit of kind of overflow. Now, again, we'll dig much more into the strategies. The couple of things that jump, again, most of this stuff is on the strategy side. One is liquidations are much less common than people think in general. Like if you look at, Liquidity, that where the fork comes from, like it's less than 1%. Now, that doesn't mean for anyone else to like, oh, well, it's not common. So like, as you said, you still got to take these things, understand where you're at. And we'll really dig into the strategy. The percentages really depend on the user and the use case as well. So we'll dig into those more, but kind of where you're at, the kind of general lines we have there, 150, 200, 300, those are definitely good earmarks, but we'll really dig heavily into the strategy side, and it makes way more sense then. I think one of the biggest misconceptions where people want to lean back is they'll look here and be like, oh, well, that this is a more risky side. Well, how do you handle everything else, right? Like if you're a more conservative player, you're not going to be anywhere near these. You're going to be 3, 4, 500%, very, very different play. So one of those is, yes, you can always be, very conscientious and safe, but most of this is how you do one thing is how you do everything. If you're a more conservative player, we're going to have much more conservative strategies, and we'll touch on that later. All
right. Sounds good. All right. So we'll touch on we'll dive in this a little bit more, but just basically here is what we're saying is, if the best way to avoid being liquidated is maintain your ICR percentage greater than 150%. Like I said, we'll talk about it. If you want to get more risky, you can bring it down and so forth. But isn't it safe to say, WaLLrus, that your ICR, your percentages of your loan are going to be dictated on the pulse. So if pulse price goes up, your ICR percentage will go up. If pulse price drops, your ICR percentage will go down. Correct?
Correct.
Right. So that's probably the biggest key. Just understand the pulse price is dictating your percentage of your volts. So just keep that in mind. There is some liquid loans. They go into the recovery mode here a little bit. We're going to dive into that a little bit more, but these are like all the little caveats that you really need to be familiar with. Once again, when I'm investing in a system, I want to know everything about it, even if it's rare or not. I think everybody needs to do their own due diligence so you understand what you're working with. Just so once again, if you understand it, then it's going to protect you.
100%.
Okay. We're going to get into some of this other stuff. We're going to talk about it, but basically, withdrawals and things like that will be temporary. Let's wait to talk about that when we get into recovery mode, because there's a lot to dive into there. Okay. Earnings now, you got that USDL, you created your vault, you got some USDL. Cool. What do I do with USDL? All right. Well, you're going to take that USDL and you can decide to maybe, if you want to take it, you can go ahead and redeem it. We'll talk about that here in another slide. Or you could take it and just hold it. You could use it to maybe DCA into Pulse if it pulls back. There's other strategies here, but in the system, you take USDL and you can put it into the stability pool. I know Liquid Loans team would appreciate it because there's a reason why it's called the stability pool. It does a lot of things for the ecosystem. One, it locks up the Pulse on the system. So by doing this, you're going to incentivize people to lock up your Pulse. That's going to help the Pulse price. It's also going to remove the risky loans because when the ICR goes below 150%, those are risky loans. It's going to help in that process. It's going to reward those people for locking up USDL. And then, of course, stability pool during the recovery mode, which I know is rare, but that becomes huge piece in that stability pool. That's a major factor of how this whole thing works. And it's all about making sure the system stays healthy, and it's consider it a system that is intuitive enough to make decisions when things happen. It knows to kick things in and then adjust to protect itself and the system and its borrowers. So we'll dive into that piece too as well. Now it's stated on there that it was going to be 10 to 30% APR, and you're going to get that in a form of Pulse and also the loan token as getting that for locking up your USDLs. You know, this is the reward you'll be getting. Now, interesting enough, was it on this one or was it another page I was looking at? Okay, maybe on another one. I apologize. So stability pool, you'll earn that, of course. You'll get that, and the borrowers can then transfer the collateral. Now, there's a nice thing. So when you get the Pulse, you can decide, hey, what do I want to do with it? You can do whatever you want with these coins. They're yours to do what you see fit. One strategy that I know we'll talk about a little bit later, you can take this Pulse and you can re-inject it into your actual vault if you start to become, your collateral starts to get low. So let's say your ICR percentage starts to get a little too low for you and you don't feel comfortable with that. You can take this Pulse and you can then add it to your vault and then boost that your ICR percentage up a little higher if you start to feel like it's getting too low and you don't want to be any risk at that time as well. Once again, the asterisk here, it says you can do this anytime you want, but once again, it's only recovery mode. I keep bringing that up, and I know it's a rare instance, but I just want to let people know that that's the only time you can't unstake or do anything with the protocol. It's a way to think about it. We're going to get into it, but recovery mode, when it does kick in, you can add to the system, but you can't take anything out of the system. And there's a reasoning behind that because, like I said, we'll get into it, but it's going to fight the system if you allow people to take out of the system. And it's not like trying to punish anybody. It's doing its job, and you'll see how that works. Okay, now the staking aspect. Now, okay, cool. Now you created your earning. Now you've got some loan token that's coming out. Great. What do I do with this token? Now you can take this and you can add it to the loan staking process here. And then in this part of the protocol, you'll stake it and you'll get PLS and USDL, and you'll get a form of 20 to 40% APR, USDL and Pulse now. This also, the yield comes from like we talked about, all those borrowing fees, redemption fees. Yeah, all that stuff the borrowers fees come from that, and the redemption fees as Pulse comes from the redemption fee process. We'll talk about that here in a second too. When you're doing the loan staking though, keep in mind, you're going to be rewarded proportional to the amount that you make up that loan staking. So if you control most of the loan staking that's in here, you're going to get more of that back, unlike everybody else. So it's proportional. It's more than fair. That's how all systems work, especially on the DEX. The Liquid Loans team, they made an interesting comment here. They said they felt like, and this makes sense, that there'll be more USDL paid out than Pulse at the beginning because, once again, there'll be more loans higher than redemptions. Because think about it, it just launches. There's going to be much more people jumping in to do loans than actually taking redemptions out. So that's a good point to bring up. The other thing to remember about all this.
Quickly.
Yeah, go ahead, Walsh.
Yeah, the other part there too is the redemptions. That function is not on for the first 14 days from the contract's launch. So it has that initial phase to help make sure that as you see really early LPs and crazy swings, you don't want there to be this kind of gouging of Pulse out of the system. And you want to get as much USDL out in the ecosystem as quick as possible. So the redemption doesn't turn on for the first 14 days. So that's part of the reason for that comment there. And then also as we get into the strategy side, that'll lean into some of the interesting arbitrage that happens early.
Nice. Now you also stated in here about each year it's going to get halved. So the yield's going to get halved each year. So I know that was stated there as well. So obviously the people earlier to the staking would benefit from it. You want to speak on that, WaLLrus?
The halving effect comes from the loan emission and the stability pool.
Okay, so the yielding here, the halving is actually more towards the earning, not the staking.
Correct. Yeah, that halving is because in the stability pool, you have a loan token emission that comes out, and that emission gets halved down, similar to like Bitcoin there.
All right, that makes sense. Okay, so correction on that. When we say the halving, it applies to the earning. Here's what we're talking about from the stability pool.
And
Okay.
just what gets
Good
paid
point.
out in the loan token. So most of that yield, again, as the system grows and all that, will come from any of the liquidation events that happen where you're able to basically get that pulse at a discount. Again for that margin. But there's that loan emission early. So that halving, it only affects the loan emission there in the stability pool.
And I think that kind of solves the issue that I was kind of looking at with as a reward coin. Is this just a dump forever? But it kind of seems like because of that halving, its loan is going to become more and more rare. Am I correct about that?
Correct. So the loan is actually, although it'll play out as some level of inflation, it has a set supply. So the amount that gets distributed to the stability pool is locked in the contract. It doesn't actually come up. It just emits there and then it's done. And the same thing with the LP rewards. It gets paid. There's a loan emission there for the first 42 days, but it's locked up initially and that's it. There's no mint function there. So the loan has these early incentives, but the magic for the loan is that once you're able to, you can stake it and then you're able to start pulling in all the other fees from it. So the staking, the yield from it is kind of the magic.
So that means that unlike a lot of these other reward coins or tokens, sorry, you are going to want to try and keep this for an actual distance of time.
If you like the yield, yeah, like I said, the yield will come out in the form of USDL and PLS. Again, once the redemptions, that's 14 days, right? So essentially, again, we want to make sure we're going through all the caveats. That's the whole idea on the video. So that first 14 days, it's a little different, but after that, that's the loan. The loan basically just sits there and it's absorbing PLS and USDL for you.
Yield goes down, but price go up.
Hey.
All right. Now we're going to get into the redemption aspect here. So redemption day, like you guys were talking about, that first 14 days is going to be shut off. So, and like WaLLrus already did a great job explaining that. So that's pretty self-explanatory now. One thing is, do not get confused between redemption and paying back your vault. That is something that I could see people really getting twisted up on. Paying back your vault is when you take USDL and you are actually paying back to the system to close out your vault, and you get your pulse back. Redemption is if you generate any type of yield or you gather USDL anywhere you want, you actually go to the protocol and you say, hey, here's my USDL. I want to give it to the system. I want pulse now. I want to exchange USDL for pulse. So big difference there. So don't get confused on that. And like I said, when we walk through the protocol, it'll make more sense when we see all this. And then once again, yeah, USDL, it's pretty straightforward. The redemption fees based on base rate. I know we've talked about it. The base rate is kind of driving factor for a lot of these loans. People curious about it, I would check out, look at the white paper on page 17 that they provided. Goes into the really nuts and bolts of the algorithm so people can understand the calculations being used there. I'm not going to dive into it here, but if you really want to dive into it, that's where it is. And anything around very low level detail, I'd recommend white papers. And we're going to give you guys the links to all the liquid loans material as well that's out there, because like I said, if you really want to dive into the nuts and bolts to the extreme low level to really understand these calculated, they're all done very well there.
Yeah, just a couple of quick comments on the redemption. So the way to always remember the difference in like a repay versus a redemption, if I go to repay on a vault, just say, if you almost kind of imagine, hey, I owe you 10, here's 5. Okay, that's a repay. A redemption, if I go in and say, hey, here's my dollars, I want the gold behind it. Well, I didn't repay anything, right? I swapped value for value, and that's how the redemptions work. So obviously, again, we'll talk about the arbitrage side, but a redemption, you're swapping for the collateral, right? So if you think of kind of like gold behind, hey, here's $5, give me my $5 worth of gold. That's how the redemption side. So those are, that's that big thing. One's a repayment, one's a swap of value through the redemption. What was the other is on the rates. So again, we're going to go through the nuts and bolts. We're digging into this. This is probably something most people want to watch more than once or jump into sections that they're really wanting to kind of gather some information on. But when you use the DApp, the rate is very clearly written right there, and it even shows you the total. So those are easy to see for the end user. As you're actually making any of these moves, it's very clear right there. So you don't have to kind of do any of the math. You can go in here, walk through it. I'd always recommend people are more educated. But for the use case and on the front, it's really simple. It's right there on the 10 in the DApp.
The funny part, WaLLrus, you keep going back with the US dollar analogy to the gold. And fortunately, people are going to have to know their history, and that the US dollar used to be backed by gold. But until, 1971, some things kind of changed there. So
right.
History lesson, US dollar used to be worth 1 ounce of gold. And actually used to say it on the dollar, 1 ounce of gold. Your dollar is not the same dollar as it used to be. Thus, another reason why crypto seems to be leaning in that direction to kind of be our savior.
Absolutely.
All right, let's dive into the Liquid Loans protocol now. Let's actually take a look at this thing. Let's stop talking about it. Let's just dive into it. All right, so when you launch the protocol, this is the site you'll see. This is exactly what it looks like. A lot of great videos of how a lot of those sections we were just talking about, staking, borrowing, the stability pool, liquidations. So they've done a great job of breaking down a lot of videos. Like I said, we're trying to give out a good little information to get everybody, enticed, get them up to speed quickly on what's going on. And then I recommend them coming to Liquid Loans to get exposed to those, more information to make until they feel comfortable. So like I said, a lot of good professional videos out here. But when you come here, here's the protocol. When you connect your wallet, you're just going to simply connect wallet, hit MetaMask in my case, and then I'm already connected. Now, what's interesting is they've also done a couple other things. I'm going to hit the Tor, but I know the Tor is going to hit on this. They did this great little thing. You launch this Tor, and it's going to walk you through the entire interface, showing you everything that you need to be familiar with. So it does a great job. But one thing that I did notice right out of the gate was how you could just click on these tokens here, and they will actually add them to your wallet. So when you click on them, let me bring up what I'll show you here. I'm going to show you what it looks like with MetaMask. Like I said, it's a dummy wallet, don't care. When you click on the MetaMask wallet, it'll actually load these tokens onto your wallet for you when you just click on those icons. So it's pretty cool. I mean, nice. It seems very simple and like, okay, that's great. Oh, whoopie-doo. But what you don't understand is that takes care of a lot of problems in crypto, especially in the DeFi world. People getting scam coins, not having the right addresses added to your wallets. That's a very nice feature. I mean, I've only seen Liquid Loans do this, and I saw it when Pulse Chain launched. So and on PulseX, I've noticed it too. So not a lot of people I've seen doing it. Hopefully, it's starting to catch on a little bit more.
Yeah, that's the thing that I really noticed that Pulse Chain was really doing correct is being able to do that type of simple little thing, right? I mean, it's tiny, but it's really big, right? And it's just, I really like the way that hexagons are always trying to innovate, right? Or pulsicons now, I guess, but they're always innovating, and that's the deal. Why I'm so bullish on this entire ecosystem, especially with the community, because it's like, oh, well, we don't want you to do such and such. Well, the hexagons are like, okay, fine, we'll make our own, and it's just as successful usually. So it's incredible the way that this community just takes off like that.
And this stuff needs to be pretty, like I've kind of made that joke that like when you're young and you're like, hey, this is cool, you kind of get like shunned. They're like, oh, that's not important. That's important. Stuff being cool, stuff being pretty, those little touches, that makes all the difference in the world. The greatest website known to man is a rectangle with a single word on it. Google and a rectangle. That's it. Like that, like it's that clean. Now, why is it that amazing? All the details and the algorithm and all these things that go in. And this stuff's hard. Like there's just so many things to this that you want. This stuff like has to be as intuitive as it possibly can. A small thing is on a lot of the dApps, if you're not connected to a wallet, you can't even see the dApp. All you get is a connect wallet page. That's very standard.
I hate
like
that.
I do as well. If we're sitting here, we're not on camera, and hey, show me that dApp. If we're sitting around, a lot of us, again, maybe we don't keep a dummy wallet on our phone. Like again, like this is stuff that is like this is 101 in Web 2, but we still have some struggles in crypto about just some of this cleanliness. So again, the Tor walkthrough, maybe you need it, maybe you don't. That should give you confidence about just, again, the level of depth that things go through. And it's really helpful for new users or to catch a feature. Again, being able to automatically add the token contracts. Again, if you're a big user, maybe you don't care. I cannot tell you how many people have issues and buy trash coins or any of that stuff because they just go ask for the contract address. Don't ask WaLLrus. Don't trust any. Get it from the dApp. Get it from official sources. Like there's all these little pitfalls that if you go through and just beautify these things, it can just, again, it makes the experience better. It's things that kind of, get the imagination going. People understand that, hey, like crypto's for real. There's a lot of great value here. But things like that save a lot of people a lot of heartache, and a ton of time goes into just the design here. So I'm really glad that you guys enjoy it.
Yeah, and just to kind of add on to that too, for everyone watching here, just think Google as it is now, right? And how you can search when it's just the main screen, and then think AOL back when that first came out, and try and search for anything.
Ask Jeeves.
Oh, the butler.
That is old. Oh man.
Yeah, so basically, I agree. Professionalism. You want things to look professional, then they need to look professional and polished, and it certainly does look that way. All right, let's dive in. Of course, you could change it if you like. You know, I prefer the dark. It's a little high. You know, I can't stand the brightness. But anyhow, let's just launch the tour. Let's just get into it because it was a new feature they added, and personally, I think it's pretty slick. All right. Once again, we already did the connect your wallet. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about. It talks about you know, clicking on these coins. You literally just click on them, and it'll add each one of those to your wallet, like I just showed you. Jump over to this now. Explainer videos. Like, I mean, literally, I like it because it's clean, it's sharp, and it's idiot proof. So somebody who's not very familiar with a lot of things in crypto, you know, the harder part is, like WaLLrus was alluding to, you know, about the simplicity and making it more professional, but also user friendly. A lot of things in crypto are not especially in the in the DeFi world, is not user friendly. So that really makes it struggle for mass adoption. This is pretty slick and very simple to use. And literally, I think they did a great job on the whole idiots guide and making it nice and clean. If you can dumb it down to a larger audience, it's more people that are going to be willing to try the product. So it's great design. Then we get in here, and here's all those, you know, these are these special, you know, percentages we were talking about. Total value locked to Pulse. Great to know. These are great stats on the system. You get to see here. Total collateral is that TCR we were talking about, right? This is the overall total collateral ratio of the entire system. USDL, how much is staked? You know, you get these nice little benchmarks here. Loan as well. What's your staking APR? USDL supply. I mean, these are great things to really have systems on. I just like seeing that stuff. I do a lot of data analysis, so I like the data. Great stuff. Here's that TCR. This is the one we were talking about here. And if you cover over the icon, the little, you know, question mark icon, it'll tell you what we were talking about. 110%, you know, if you're at your ICR is at 110%, you know, you're in the red area. It's your high risk, you know, for getting liquidated. In orange, 150 to 110, and you can read the rest of the numbers. Thus, you can see why the team was recommending, if you wanted to play it safe, you'd want to, you know, go above 200%. Just, you know, but everybody's got their own risk tolerance. So that's what this whole TCR is. Really good stuff.
That looks awesome, by the way, too, being a little battery. That is so cool.
Yeah. Now we're going to get into the borrowing. So we talked about it in the protocol. How do you borrow? How do you create those vaults? This is how you would do it. What I want to do next, though, is before I do that, what I want to do is I want to disconnect my wallet because I don't have any actual coins in my wallet. So I want to be able to play with this so we can see it. So let's just jump right through here real quick. Go right back out to the borrowing section. Hit next. Now you can go in here and now you can actually put in how many you want. So let's just say if I wanted to do, I don't know, 10 million, you know, Pulse, you know, what you would actually get. You would get, you know, the borrowing on that would be, you'd get, this is like defaulted at that rate. So what you can see, and if I hit next over here, clicking over to here, keep in mind, if I go back and I change this number, I can change this and it will change my ICR percentage that we were talking about. So let's go back over here and take a look at those numbers now. 10,000 Pulse. Your borrowing fee has already been calculated. You know, you got 55,000 USDL. Liquid, here's that 200 that we talked about for the liquidity reserve. The borrowing amount then would come out to be this amount. And then the total transaction debt is going to be this. Shows me my ICR is at 150%. All right, well, maybe I don't want to do 150%. So maybe I'll just pull back on that sum. How about we just go back here and we'll knock this down to maybe, I don't know, maybe 8 million. Let's just take a look at where we're at now. Now it jumps to 183%. It's green because it's not in a high risk, like we said. So just wanted to go through these numbers here. So it's, to me, this is a freaking easy interface. It's real simple. How much Pulse do you want to give? And then how much USDL do you want to take out for your Pulse? Remember, Pulse is the collateral to the vault that you're making, or loan. Let's just simplify it. I'm giving Pulse. I want to get a loan. I'm giving my collateral as Pulse. I want to get USDL value out. I didn't sell my Pulse. I've created a contract. Now I've got USDL to do what I want with it. If I want to get my Pulse back, I'm going to have to put back the amount for that, for the debt that I created, which is probably going to be what? Is it the borrowing amount, WaLLrus, that would take it, or is it the total transaction debt?
Total transaction debt.
Okay, so you would need to put up this much to get back my 10 million, you know, Pulse that would have to come out of that. Keep it in mind. So WaLLrus, one quick question for you. So let's say Pulse value goes up in value. Do I would assume I would have to give, do I still have to pay back the same amount of USDL, or do I pay back a lesser amount of USDL?
So how that interaction there will work is there's a few different things that we can play with from the vault here. So the debt amount does not change no matter what the price of Pulse does. It all moves
Okay.
around. So so again, your debt from the system's concern is there's the number's a little small. There's almost 9 million there in USDL. As long as there's enough Pulse in the system for that USDL, the system's happy, right? So all that you'd have to do is you can pay back that USDL all the way down and pull the Pulse out. If the price of Pulse, say it doubled, right? Let's just say it doubles, you could mint more USDL. So like the same way you were adding, taking out less USDL or adding Pulse back to change that ICR, you can also do the same on the way up. So if it doubled, you could go and pull out more USDL to go do whatever you're doing to come back in that level. Or you can also just add Pulse. So for example, if you're doing stability pool or providing LP, any of this other stuff, you can also add Pulse back to, now again, that won't change the debt, but you can add Pulse to top it off to raid that ICR. So you can kind of play with all of those functions.
All right, makes sense. Appreciate that. Yep. So nice clean view. Understand that you can add to the vault, and you can add to your vaults, and you can drive that ICR down more. So WaLLrus, just to clarify here. So if you create a vault and I take out USDL, are you telling me I can always add Pulse to it to bring up my ICR percentage? But can you just to clarify, did you say you could pull it out the other way? Could you actually extract, like give more USDL and borrow on it again? So you can borrow on that vault again, is correct?
Yep.
Okay.
And that is correct. And the reason that's an important understanding is that vault isn't like a static thing. Like it's a position, right? So now again, in some ways you kind of want to understand like 1, 2, 3, what am I doing here? But when it comes to strategies and again, we'll really get into a few things, but for perspective, the reason that's important is this thing's fluid, right? So if I'm, again, if I have other Pulse, I can top off Pulse and that will raise that ICR. I can mint more USDL. So again, if we're looking at managing this as a position, that's where these things kind of come in. So for a kind of a simple user, right off the bat, it's as long as that price of Pulse, it keeps me above 110%. All I have to do is come back and repay the USDL. But for somebody who's kind of managing a position to doing these other really interesting things, you have all these options, right? So here, if the price of Pulse doubled, I might be off on a few percent. So I'm using round numbers. If it doubles, you'd be closer to like 360%. And then you could pull more USDL out, right? So if you were taking out this position because you were, providing LP or you're chasing yield, right? Maybe you're turning it into PulseX and single-sided staking. Maybe you're taking 8 million and you're taking it in Hex and rolling a 30-day stake, right? So you could take this, roll a 30-day stake, and then be kind of scraping the yield off all these different things that we might do in the DeFi space. So if we're using this as a way of managing that position, then if, again, Pulse doubled, we could pull out more USDL, keep it that same ratio, and then have more value to be moving around and doing these other things in the market. And we could, again, as we come back, we can repay, we can add Pulse. All these things kind of give us levers to pull on as we want to manage that position later.
All right. Yep. Makes sense. All right. Let's dive into the stability now. We talked about this. When you create the vault, you get the USDL. Now let's dive in to see how you take that USDL and put it into the stability. So this one's, it's pretty straightforward. How much USDL do you want to put into the system? You don't have to put all the USDL you just received. You could put whatever you want, you feel comfortable with. So let's just do, I don't know, nice round number of 10,000 USDL if you wanted to go that route. And you can click on these numbers here. So what are these supposed to do actually? These percentages here.
So those are the presets in there to give you just kind of some easy access points. So if you had
based on the
USDL,
wallet.
Yep.
Gotcha,
So the only one that's a little clunky for everybody, and this is anything that people, I'm sure if people use like limit orders or transactions, they've had this kind of finicky. So with stability pool, it's simple. On the borrow side, you have those same presets, but if you click 100%, then you don't have the transaction. So you have to go in there and actually pull out a little bit of Pulse for the transaction fee. Just one of those reminders that's one of those things, but it's easy to, hit 100 and then pull a couple of percentages off. On the stability pool, it's USDL. You can click any of them.
Nice. Yep. So yeah, so for the wallet, just to clarify, I mean, great explanation from WaLLrus. Bottom line, if I actually had these coins in my wallet, then I could just hit these click these quickly if I wanted to see what those amounts are. So those are nice little shortcuts. Some hits in here and calculate it. Just another user-friendly piece. All right, so new stake. I put in 10,000 USDL. Total staking balance is going to be 10,000. Pretty straightforward. Pool shares. I'm assuming this would change once we start getting activity into the stability. I assume.
Correct. If you were connected and actually performing this transaction, it will show you that percentage there. So the percentage of the pool for most users, it's just get a little data piece. It's interesting. If you are a really, really big player, you might be interested in seeing like what your true percentage is. For again, we're going to see big numbers here. So for most people, you're just going to see 0.000 something, 0.00, all that kind of good stuff. But it's nice to see just as another feel, a metric, like as you said. Many of us, we're data guys. We just want the numbers. So yeah, it's going to give you that percentage of the total USDL in the pool. It's going to let you know what your share is.
Right. Makes sense. And then of course the rewards of what you're getting. So if you already had, I assume, rewards already in the system of the stability, it's going to show you how much you've accrued over time for the pulse and also for the loan because keep in mind, pulse and loan are the two coins you'd be getting from the stability pool.
Correct. And now, so that will sit there and populate itself. So if we stuck this in, come back in any length of time, we would, when we connect our wallet, we would see we'd see our position, our percentage of the pool, and you'd have those rewards. And literally it'll just tell you, hey, X amount of pulse, X amount of loan. Do you want to pull it out? Click the button. That's it.
And are these being calculated? How often are they being calculated? Is it daily?
So the loan has an emission, so it's on a block timer. So again, that just comes out constantly. The PLS, that's something interesting. That's a really neat function. And so the stability pool side of where the yield comes from is really cool. So this is something I like to highlight, and it's part of the reason that like Hex guys are really big on this. What the yield being trustless, knowing where it comes from is really important. People in FTX didn't ask this. People in all these other issues we've seen, right? So like not just, how much yield, where does it come from? Does it make sense? So what's cool about the yield and the stability pool is it functions again, we talked about it, how it works from a protocol standpoint, but from a user, putting USDL in the stability pool is almost like a limit order minus 10% of the current price. So that difference that you have in the collateral, so that 110% that we talk about, that 10% margin is where the yield comes for a stability pool player. So essentially, for every dollar that you have in the stability pool, whenever any of these liquidation events happen, you're basically getting $1.10 worth of pulse. So if you are looking at DCAing or like this is something that I think a lot of users do where if they're taking rewards, like a lot of us like to keep some amount of stable coin around. If you want to keep some stable coin around, maybe you have a DCA strategy. So you brought in 10K and you're going to put in, 2K every Friday for a length of time. Any of these types of like strategies here, this is somewhere where on top of all the normal ways, you can park USDL here and whatever liquidation you get, essentially you got the best rate possible on that pulse because again, it basically works like a limit order minus 10%. So it's a great way to accumulate pulse.
Yeah, it's actually pretty slick because I mean, it's almost like sitting in dry powder, but you're accruing yield while you're sitting there just waiting. So yeah, you're getting rewarded just for sitting in dry powder.
Exactly.
All right, let's take a look at the staking pool now. The interfaces you guys should see at this point are all very simplistic. They are user-friendly, stake, unstake. They all have the two options at the top always, and of course, you just put in what you want. So once again, when you did the stability pool, you got the loan tokens. So the loan tokens you would put in here, and I'll just 5,000 to show a quick example. And once again, the same interface, what your current APR is at, and where you're at. And of course, these will occur like WaLLrus was just saying, these are real time. So these are being real time calculated. So you're going to be getting the latest. It's not like waiting for, say, a 24-hour clock. It's going to be changing or getting updated as they occur. So that's nice to see. And of course, the same interface as it was on the stability side as well. So nice.
Yep. And again, a few minor differences there, but the same way. So the redemption fees, they hit when there's a redemption. So that's one of the interesting kind of mechanics there is that we still use like APR because again, like there's, some scope. We got to use things that people kind of have a have a bit of a measuring stick for. But the yield that comes out from either liquidations or from like redemptions and originations is actually, can be very spiky. So it could be, theoretically 0, let's take a week period. It could be 0 up till Friday, and then Friday top 10 wallets come through and hammer these things, and then you get a big, huge spike. So that APR is always a calculation over time. But kind of like when we talk about price appreciation, we say, hey, it was ever, X amount, this many X's over a year. What it really was is probably 80% of that probably happened in like 45 days. And it's similar here, just as an interesting little caveat for people who are trying to look at gamesmanship or, big yield opportunities. So that's something just as kind of a reminder that those percentages are, kind of calculated over a base, but they come in spikes, really not in waves. So just something interesting for the people that like the data and some of the nuts and bolts.
Yep. Interesting about yield. So now we get into the LP rewards. So this was a key here, the 45 days on mainnet. So this is going to be something that we'll talk about, but on the first 45 days, I'm assuming the LPs are going to be pretty juicy. So at this point here, you'd come here to do your LP staking. So at this point, are you staking? So let me ask you, WaLLrus, are you taking the 2 coins that create the LP and you're creating those where, like on PulseX, and then taking that created, PLP coins and sticking them here, and this is where you're going to be staking them off? Or how does this work exactly?
See, doesn't that just feel kind of confusing? So if you'll click, no, this is going to throw us off here just a little bit. We're going to have to run through the 14.
That's fine.
If you click the X.
Next.
No, X out.
Sure, no worries.
You should be able to see the link there on the right-hand side. So it is USDL Pulse Pair version 2. And where do I provide LP? Give us a click.
PulseX.
If you click the link there, and then it will pull you up, and it literally takes you right there. So it'll put you on version 2 and in your pair. Boom, there you go.
Nice.
So I want to go ahead and mention how awesome that this is as well, because there is a Pulse Chain also started doing this where they always bring you back to PulseX for creating liquidity pairs. I think is a very good way to kind of unify everyone together. You know what I mean?
Yep. So assuming that so this is version 2, and the reason that it has to be on V2 is if you were on V1, you wouldn't get the LP fees as the provider yourselves. So we did it exclusively on V2 because we want everyone providing LP to take all that value, right? So this is the neat part here. So if we were a first-time user, we would walk through those steps just like we had gone through. We'd open up a vault. We have our USDL. We go to the LP rewards. We click right here, and it takes you to the exact screen. No, you're not going to click V1. You're not going to the wrong pair. None of that. You would go through here. You could set in your totals. You would click, connect, confirm, and then those LP tokens will be right in your wallet as soon as you finish this transaction. So all you would do is then you would exit this tab. You go back to right there in the dApp and stake the tokens. So we just performed that transaction. The LP tokens would now be in our wallet, and we would stake them right here. So you have that one link that jumps to PulseX, but it all flows right here through the dApp.
Yep, exactly. That's
something I really respect.
That was a nice feature. You click that here. Now, I knew there was going to be, it's not just going to be Pulse. I assume there's going to be there's going to be a couple more different LPs too, correct? It's not going to be just this USDL and Pulse. Is it going to be another one?
So that's the only pool that's going to have this incentive reward. So we wanted to, that's the pair that, has the most transactions, it has all the volume. It's what's going to allow things to route from Pulse into USDL, from USDL into Pulse, and all the other pairs on the system. So that's the one that's the most important. Now, everyone is more than welcome. You can create any other pool. That's the whole point of DeFi. You don't have to ask. But we did it specifically on V2 because, again, that's one, we're going to support PulseX. We want to support the ecosystem, all the native users. And we wanted to make sure that, again, the people doing the LP get those fees as well. So that's why we specifically did that pair.
Nice. Very nice. I was going to launch the tour, but I think I'm just going to go right down the line here on this piece. Sure. But let's just go down here. But yeah, that's great. So this is definitely playing into the strategy. Keep in mind, guys, when we said that 45 days, we'll come back to that.
And it's essentially, it's almost for everyone else. It's like an ink farm, right? Only rather than having to go basically staking it in the farm side on PulseX, it's right here in the DApp. So again, for everyone in their heads, essentially, again, it's very, very similar to an ink farm. Only again, the way we have it here is, again, that rather than an ink, it's a loan emission there. So it has 150 billion. Again, it's not inflationary. That total amount that goes for the LP rewards is part of that, launch of the contracts. So it just has a bag that's locked up in the smart contract, and it just emits until it's done, and then it's over.
Nice. I like it. Yep. And of course, early adopters are going to probably get the higher percentages, right? First come in.
Yep. So you're going to be a big part of the pool, right? So if there's just the three of us and we all throw in the same amount, well, then I'm going to get 30% of the bag early on until everybody starts to pile in. Now, again, we'll touch on some of that with the strategies, but we kind of can go through some of those ranges. But I think a lot of what we're seeing is that, again, obviously I love the DApp. It makes me so happy. But when you see the different facets here, there's a lot, right? Like, so often we only talk about the borrowing. There's a lot that goes here, but everything is individually simple. So if you said, hey, I want to borrow USDL, boom, that's simple. But there's a lot in the system, and I think that there's a lot for individual people. So we're going to touch on some of this cool stuff with arbitrage. And I think in the strategy side, what I would like for a lot of people to get out of is hey, if you're a shark, you understand all these words and you're like, man, WaLLrus is dumb, I'm going to get way more. Cool. Do your thing, crush the system, make all the value in the world. I'm very, very happy. For everyone else, when they listen to the strategy side, think about what resonates with you or which parts you really understand. And you can do those things one at a time and take kind of, baby steps. So if we start talking as we get into redemptions here shortly, and we're getting into arbitrage and moving through all these platforms, that may not be your bag. Stability pool's real easy. You just click stake, right? So for early users, they can spread between these things. There'll be, again, there's going to be, big rises and those kind of valleys. So for everyone's skill set, take your time. There's a lot of cool toys here, but just do one thing at a time. Don't think that you have to be redeeming and LP rewarding and stability, and like, you don't have to be doing all these things to take advantage. You could never borrow, never do anything, and you could just redeem, and there'd be value in the system for you. You could use USDL on market, never touch the DApp, and there'd be value. So don't be overwhelmed. There's a lot of cool stuff that we're going to keep going through. But just, again, feel free to just use any individual thing. You're not missing out. Do one thing at a time.
Yep. Do what you feel comfortable with. Know where you stand. Don't take on more than you can, or you're going to get destroyed. That's pretty much how it is in crypto. Sounds good. All right. So at this point, you got redemption, right? So redemption, like we said, this is not ending your vault. You're not ending your loan. This is just, you've accumulated, USDL, and you want to basically pull, get back some PLS for it, right? So you would just put in what you want, and that's the pulse you would get back out. It's pretty simple. You just connect your wallet, and you go through this, and probably hit the connection fee, just like anytime you connect a wallet to any type of DEX, or sorry, a DApp. You're just going to go through the interface, submit it in your wallet, and that's it. You're done. And then those coins will appear in your wallet, and it's pretty straightforward. I mean, there's not a whole lot to it, except for, yes, you got the redemption fees that can change and fluctuate slightly on that base rate. But once again, when you put in here, you're going to know what the rates are. You're going to know what you're getting before you decide to do it. So pretty much it there. So this is finally getting back your pulse if you want to go that route. All right, let's get into liquidations. Now, liquidations are going to be interesting. So, WaLLrus, to be able to see the examples, do I have to do the tour?
To do the examples, or if you connect, it'll start to populate there.
Let's do that real quick. Cool, perfect. So when you come here to the risk vaults, this is what we talked about. What's nice about it is you can see the list of all the tiers, right? Starting with the most, you're seeing here at 110, this person's very close to liquidation. And then he goes right down the line, everybody's just in order, right? So you do not want to be the guy towards the top if you have the lowest ICR, because you're the most at risk to probably getting liquidated. With that being said, anybody can come out here and click the liquidation button. And what's nice about it, and WaLLrus, I know we had it on the presentation. I don't know if we kind of glanced over that a little bit, but when you click this, any user can come out and click this liquidate. So they would get a small percentage of whatever the pulse was in the vault, and they also get that 200 USDL that was put up that to be handled for overhead expenses for liquidation. Is that accurate?
And It's a public call. It does not have to be the vault owner. Everyone can click it. So I'll let you finish there, and then I'll have kind of a roundabout on the liquidations there. Liquidation sounds scary, but when you look at how they affect the system on the whole, people will see why that instant liquidation and that public call is as valuable as it is.
Right. Well, one question I had while we're here is, so does it have to go below 110 before anybody can hit liquidate?
100%.
So once it goes to 110, you're fair game, and it's first come, first serve. Whoever's the first one to hit that liquidate button, they're the ones that would claim it.
Correct.
Right? Yeah. Yep. Gotcha. We'll dive in here. So really, this is the list of all the vaults that are out there and where their collateral is, so you can see that, and anybody can liquidate when they want.
See, my kind of worry about that though is going to be that you're going to have people literally just sitting there watching, right? So would that technically be a strategy that people could use?
So there's a couple things that are. It's funny that the instant liquidation is definitely the thing that would give people the most pause, and it's actually one of the best aspects of the system. So one is, you're absolutely right. So it's first come, first serve. As soon as those things go below that 110, they can be instantly liquidated. Now, you can sit there and watch and play the sniper game, and especially on testnet, people can get a chance to play with it. On mainnet, similar to like the buy and burn with PulseX or other incentivized public call functions. And just quickly, a public call function just means it's a part of the contract that does not have to have that associated wallet use it, right? So I can't go to Tracker's vault and pull out more USDL, right? Because that has to come from that's a private call. It comes from his wallet. This here, if his wallet his vault went below 110%, it's a public call to call that liquidation event. So it just means that anyone can do it. So you'll probably see that there's scripts running on that people have kind of bots set up. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't go in there and snipe a couple, but we'll see how that plays out, right? That is up to the community on there. Now,
yeah, that's kind of my first reaction was going to be people are going to set up bots.
Right. So why that collateral and it being instantly liquidated is beneficial is the downstream effects. Okay, so 110% is very low minimum collateral. Like if people think about, auto loans or home loan or like any kind of traditional thing where you put up collateral, 110% is really low. Like typically you're wanting like 120, 130. Like that means your bullets and it's a really valuable commodity that they don't see is going to go down, all these kinds of things, right? So if you look at things like the Maker DAO contract where they have a slow auction process and there's more kind of pageantry to how these liquidation events happen, they have to have a higher collateral because they have to absorb that risk of the time, right? So if it takes a week to go through this, Pulse can go down more than 10% in a week. So then you'd have to raise that minimum. Okay, so if you raise the minimum, you raise the risk of what happens when you get liquidated. So if you get liquidated, you only lost 10%, right? So if you took out, 100K worth of USDL, XYZ goes around and you get liquidated, by the time that price moved down to get you liquidated, there was only 110K worth of Pulse. So all you have is that 10% there margin. If you didn't have instant public call liquidations that were super efficient, that would have to raise that collateral to basically make up for the inefficiency in the system. And then you'd have it a bigger risk. So if the minimum was 130, 140, then being liquidated would be a order of magnitude more impactful on your bag. So when we look through liquidations, that low minimum and the instant nature of them is efficiency in the system. So that's a positive. That's why that minimum collateral is so low. And the other side is when we look at the collateral behind it and how we can handle these things, being that is low opens it up to some stop loss functions that are really important. And again, we'll touch on those with strategies. And then just the last quick point on liquidations. Liquidations in this are very different than what you have in like a leverage trade. So if you open up, and I'll keep this brief, but if you open up 100K and you're 5x leverage on Bitcoin, when it goes down, you're nuked, zero, gone. Like there's nothing behind, right? If you take a position in LL and you pull out USDL and you get liquidated, you still have all the USDL. It's not that you get nuked to zero. Now, again, we're going to keep touching on liquidations and strategies. So again, you don't really want those events. You are going to lose the percentage. Depending on what you did with that USDL, you may not be in a position to kind of regain. So we're going to touch on the strategy side. but a liquidation is not. It's not the same wrecked, like you got to go explain this crying to your wife that you would have in a leverage trade. It's very, very different in the system.
So yeah, kind of the way I would put that then is it kind of seems unfair, almost like that anybody ever could just liquidate you. They'll probably set up bots to liquidate you. But what you need to understand, everybody's watching this, is that these are people who are quite literally either being kind of ridiculous with their money and they haven't learned anything, or they've just forgotten that they have it. And at that point, the health of the system itself, the health of the entirety of Pulse Chain, is really going to be coming off of this here. So I mean, it quite literally is a very important piece.
And again, we'll save it. We'll save that for the strategy pipe. But yeah, it's good stuff.
All right. The other thing that they guys have provided that are nice are these numbers, charts, graphs, so you can get an idea for the different things that are happening. So graphical representation on the system, how, what's being locked up, numbers, trends, and that stuff, which is really good to see. One thing, WaLLrus, I was curious was, would they be considering to add, are they going to try to add more charts, or can they not add more charts? Because I'm curious on things like the TCR percentage, if there's going to be a chart representing that, or representing, the base rate, so people can see how it's responding over time. I didn't know how much that they were going to be adding, or are these going to be all the charts you guys are going to be handling?
So the chart selection there is for someone like yourself. You brought up earlier, hey, I'm a data guy, I want to chew through it. This is a little more cursory, right? So this is standard user, beautified, wants to come in, hey, what's going on with the system, right? So if you start to add some of the stuff that you would probably really want, it would really start to like clog that up, because you probably want really interesting stuff, right? Like TCR over time, where's the distribution of these vaults and interesting stuff like that. So those probably will not add much. Like we could probably add another 2, just, if things kind of evolve. So front ends can always be adapted and changed. It's codes that can't, right? So they'll probably stay the way they are, because they're just meant to be, again, kind of cursory at a glance. The kind of analytics that you would probably want to be making like really involved decisions. There's a few different third-party platforms like Dune that people can build these dashboards, and either the team and third parties will go through and build again, data that you would want to be making like really involved decisions, but the DApp will probably stay pretty simple and clean.
That's a fair point. But with all the the Pulse chain and Hex community, they're going to be pulling data and pulling all types of charts. So you're right. They'll probably have many people doing that. So that's a good point. And then of course you click on the knowledge base and it brings you to the white paper docs, and then everything you need in here. There's that video we were talking about, breakdown of the whole. This is deep dives into a lot of different areas we talked about, and of course all the different medias and different tubes and all the media content you'd want. So everything is here laid out for you. And then of course, I know the adding the tokens. So this is just, once again, I think you guys already had it here. You can click here and add it to your wallet, but by having it here, just once again, at least you can see the addresses. Sometimes it's great to have those addresses, because you can paste them into, like, say, the Pulse chain, actual network that you track in, and see numbers that are going on there. So that's good stuff too. Of course, quick links here. So yeah, everything looks really good here. I mean, this looks great. You guys did a fantastic job. It's very clean. It's very responsive. I just like it. It's just a clean overall look. So yeah, you guys did a hell of a job, man.
There's a lot of extra little time and revisions. Dapps are so important. There's, I'll call out the Curve guys a bit, because I love their stuff. If you look at the Curve DeFi code, contracts, the math in their liquidity pools, multiple asset stuff, it is magical. Like, those guys are different kind of monkeys than I am, man. Like, they are brilliant, brilliant people. And their front end looks like it was written in DOS. Like, it's a small step above the Oregon Trail. And now I'm teasing those guys because they're great, right?
Mm-hmm.
But those things aren't engaging. They don't have the same, there's some romanticism with the tech, and we want value, and we want people to understand, like what goes into this stuff. So yeah, we're very, very keen on the design, the layout, these principles, making this stuff easy and intuitive.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man. Really sharp. All right, let me switch back to the presentation. We're going to dive into now. Actually, I think I was already there. Here we go. All right, we're going to dive in. We've been talking about it, so let's just dive right into it. What the heck is this recovery mode thing you guys keep talking about? All right, once again, we want to know how systems work. So what happens is this, they do a great chart. Liquid Loans did a great breakdown of what actually happens with various vaults. If they're either below 100%, ICR, if your vault's less than, less than 100%, what happens to the vaults, collateral, what happens to it, what happens if it's between, 100 and 110%. And of course, if it's, less than 150%, what happens to it? If it's between, the TCR, which is, total, the TCR could go less than 150, but it could get, recovery mode gets triggered at less than 150. So it could go all the way to 150. So just telling you here what happens to the other vaults when all this kicks in. And like WaLLrus has been alluding to, it truly is to help stabilize the system. WaLLrus, I know you've done a great job on this. So I'd kind of like you to explain why the heck would you have recovery mode in here and why it's so important to have that stability pool? Because I know you can do a better job than I can.
Yeah, appreciate it. So the idea on the stability pool is some of the functions around wanting to make, again, it's that relationship between collateral and stablecoin. So the stability pool, again, kind of like that rehash on where it comes from, is it's this making sure that there's the proper amount of collateral for all the USDL that exist. So when that vault gets liquidated, it's here and it's going to go burn the amount of USDL out of the stability pool. So that USDL is gone as that collateral comes out, and that's where this health of the ecosystem comes in, right? Like that's the main thing. Again, all these little functions are about protecting the collateral ratio behind USDL. So when you have recovery mode, this is sort of that last, okay, the system is basically coming down. So you can kind of think of this as again, that final set of parameters to make sure that USDL always has collateral. And this is also, again, if you want to like really work through some of the meta, like this is how you basically like unwind liquid loans back down to zero. So if you went through and were like XYZ kind of apocalyptic boom thing, any of these sort of things as you work through, essentially it would go through and you'd watch it go through stability pool, go through vaults, all the way down, recovery mode triggers. We'll work through some of this here. And this would be how you basically unwind it down to the last USDL. So the reason all these things are important is, one, if you have USDL without collateral, we all know how fractional reserves are a problem. We've seen those spirals. We talked about algorithmic stablecoins. You can't have it. And then the last is, again, I mean, that's really what it is you always have to make sure there's enough collateral for that USDL. So, stability pool, and then these functions here to make sure that the system could unwind down to basically a true zero in a balanced way where you don't have any of these edge cases where you'd have uncollateralized USDL in the market.
Fantastic. So ultimately, you can see how it's being broken down by vaults here. So anything that's less than 100% ICR, it's going to be given out to the other vaults out there to basically fund those vaults. And then anything that's basically anything that's above 100% is going to basically also be used to interface with the stability pool. One caveat people need to understand. So if it's under 110% and you have a vault, it's all gone. Forget it. You have no more, there's no pulse there. It's gone. You keep the USDL that you guys had, but you lost the pulse that was put up for collateral, rightfully so. But if it goes into recovery mode, you could have a percentage. So in this case, if it does happen, the 110% gets taken, but the rest of the percentage, so let's say you had your, I don't know, let's just say it was up to the TCR went, like in this example, 148%. That means you'd still have 38%. That then gets taken and put into another vault and is put away from the system. Is that correct, WaLLrus? It's not interacting with the system now. It's just set aside for you to redeem it when you want it. Because
correct.
Is that fair to say? Okay.
Yep. So that function, the same thing where you see the less than 100, those things are basically placed in for sort of in your head like a spike event. So it's, again, like recovery mode is very uncommon. So it's, hey, this is the what if weird stuff happens, essentially. So again, that's where you see these extra parameters. And those are, again, ways to sort of make that order of operations clean and go through and protect the health of the system when big edge cases happen.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch base on that just a little bit. So you guys, I know you had stated that this was a lot, some of this, the code or you guys used was it from Ethereum? Was it from Liquidity protocol?
Liquidity.
Is that correct? Liquidity, my bad.
LQQY,
Sorry. Yep.
Liquidity.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. Liquidity, which is already, it's on Ethereum. So you guys, so that's already been battle tested. So my curiosity is, so how's that system done currently? Has it ever gone into, is there a recovery mode for that system?
Yes, and it's never hit it.
Never hit it. There you go. How long has
Mhm.
it been alive? I'm just curious.
Over 2 years.
2 years. So it's never had recovery mode. So that's good to know. So extremely rare event if it happens. And keep in mind, I mean, so it's interesting. So 2 years, it has lived through more or less more of a bear market, but it was also at the early infant stages when it ramped up and early in the, the run up. And then of course, this, grueling grind we've had downward, but it's still has
FTX,
never,
lots of these
yeah,
other
all that
price
stuff
movements. Yeah,
still
lots of
never,
black swans.
yes, exactly. Never has gone in recovery mode. So that's very interesting. So it's been pretty stabilized. There's a question I want to bring up on that too later on, but let's just stick to what we have here on this one. But yeah, that's great. Glad we touched based on it. Like I said, people could see these little asterisks here, and I wanted everybody to understand though that, okay, so in 2 years system's been live, never happened. So, but you still want to know it could happen. So just keep in mind, rare event. It has not even happened on the system yet. All right, let's talk about what makes it exciting here. Now, Jax, is that his name, Jax?
Jexa.
Jexa.
Yeah.
So he's the one that did a great job on all these videos that Liquid Loans has. Fantastic job. Really explains it in a very user-friendly way of explaining it to where anybody can pretty much understand what he's talking about. So he did a fantastic job at that.
Mhm.
One thing he touched on that really gives you a very good sense of how Liquid Loans is going to impact the Pulse chain ecosystem. And I like the analogies they gave here. So if you look at Hex as a savings account, you look at Liquid Loans as the lending and central bank, right? That's a powerful word to have there as a central bank for the Pulse chain network. And then of course we know PulseX exchange market, that's the DEX. And then we have Pulse chain, which is the platform. So if you understand that these are how you need to start looking at the system, you can start seeing how this whole network starts to interact with each other. So it's really fascinating because what they're talking about here is you create a vault, then you mint that USDL. You decide what you want to do with it. Do you want to go into maybe a liquid, an LP pool? If you do that, you create this LP, and then it's going to lock up, Hex, could lock up Pulse, could lock up any other coins it says, and it stays in these LPs. Then you earn Pulse from that. Then you go back into the vault, and we'll talk about it. There's a strategy that talks about this. Then you're also creating, you're locking up even more Pulse down here and USDL, and you're now creating fees by incentive for the loan token. You're also feeding into PulseX because PulseX has that buy and burn process in here. So every time there's a transaction in here on the PulseX, there's a percentage of that gets burned up. It's gone. So it's deflationary on the PulseX. So you're locking up Pulse. This is going to drive locking up Pulse more. It's going to drive, burning off PulseX. Potentially, PulseX could probably put into an LP of some sort with it. So you're locking all these great things up right now. So it's pretty interesting to see how this is all going to play. But I just keep seeing a lot of interactions here that are going to cause, I don't want to say a rarity, but it's going to remove coins off of it. Thus, it should see a positive. It's going to help overall. It's going to help with the overall system. WaLLrus, I know you got a lot on this one, man. So what do you have on this one? Because this was a fascinating dive that he provided on this.
There's just, I mean, like this is the magic, right? Like, so, looking through those things, sometimes when we, I'm always a little careful. I don't like to be too critical of other things, but so many times when we look at, different tokenomics, mechanics, protocols, they're kind of Rube Goldberg machines where you're like, I can turn this thing into this thing, and then it comes out with the duck, and the duck's worth more than the thing I put in. And there's all kinds of interesting games. So again, I don't want to be too pessimistic. I'm just framing it that there's a lot of things where you're like, all right, cool. So like you're kind of just hoping at some point number goes up, where like these are the DeFi, protocols that have like they do traditional things. They do value, right? Like they perform transaction. They give us these tools. They allow us to be DeFi, decentralized finance. Like these are supposed to be tools that are financial that are now broken apart so that we don't have these central points of failure and censorship, right? So one of the things I think is people are getting in with LL. So you can, as we touched on here, you can, just go chase the yield on the staking pool mechanics, the arbitrage. So there's there's sort of the, a step back, hey, I just want to chase yield. But sometimes when we look at the, USDL, LP, or the lending function itself, like sometimes when we talk about the loan, it's, well, why would you want that in the first place? So I think sometimes people kind of look, well, I don't need a loan. Why would I do this? Well, then you wouldn't yet. But then you look at the options, like, what can I do with it, right? And that's where we get into some of these other facets here, and a lot of it will tie in with the strategies. But this, like, we want all these options. Like, there's a reason that lending exists. There's a reason that certificate of deposit. And when you even look at Hex even has some interesting things where if you look at a ladder, it functions kind of like a coupon bond, another very strong traditional tool. So this is what we wanted, right? Like, this is what crypto and DeFi. This is sort of a, I think the bell that we've rang for a few years that I don't think was true originally. Like, we didn't actually have that much DeFi. We had some stuff we called DeFi. Now we're getting into like, hey, this is real decentralized financial tools that there's a lot of gains, there's yield to be had, but it just gives us a tool set, right? So much of what we do is, all right, so if I do all these things and I click all these colorful buttons, eventually I have more dollars, right? Like, that's what this stuff comes down to. The more tools we have, one, if you want to keep playing the original game, you can make more dollars. All right, that's a good enough reason by itself. The other is, the more I have access to these types of tools, the less I have to just go convert back to dollars, right? Now, where you're at, life position, there's all kinds of things that change that stuff. But the more tools we have, the more we can do inside of the space, and then the more things that come next, right? So if you don't have more than one DEX, you don't need a DEX aggregator. If you aren't going to be making payments, you don't need stable coins. Well, if you're going to be making lots of stable coins, then you can use other ones. And then you get these things start to build, right? So having these types of tools open up everything else, right? Things start to get built on top. There's multiple front ends, things that are getting built on top of LL. This is what we really wanted, right? So again, if you just in the number go up camp, cool. There's plenty of yield and number go up. But when you look through these things and like you're performing tasks, right? Like, the reason that you get LP fees is because I get to use your LP, right? When I just go, hey, I want to change USDC into Hex, that happens now. Like, there was a world before Uniswap. That wasn't a thing before. You used to have to go manually find somebody, go to a central exchange. Uniswap changed that. This ability to swap on chain, that's new. That's not that old. What is it? 6 years? It's 2016, 2017. So these tools, we're just understanding, like, as they grow. Uniswap was originally, hey, you don't have to go to an exchange. Look what Uniswap is now and how fundamental it is to everything we do, inside of crypto. And the same thing with PulseX. So I just couldn't be more bullish, man. I love real financial tools. I like the stuff we're building. The stuff is real, it's functional, and then there's tons of tokens, number go up, LP, all the value. Like, this is the best stuff in crypto.
Yeah, and I'll add to that too, is that the hexagons and people that are in the Pulse chain ecosystem are the people who've been around, understand a lot of this stuff. But I don't think everybody's been so, I don't want to say critical, because prices have been getting beat up because they're all market and Pulse chain, but it's just launched. It hasn't even gotten going. The functionality and the possibilities of things being built haven't even started. So, like, to me, yes, Hedron, I like Hedron, I like Tacosa, I like the concept. I love the HSI concepts about locking up and creating, basically like an NFT where you can actually sell that and to sell your hex that are staked, and that functionality that's amazing. And Alex, what he did with that program has been really great. Now you're moving into another aspect, that is the loan aspect. Like we're talking about now, this is just like leveraging a bank where you're taking out a loan on your collateral. You can actually use this and put it to other things you want to do. And then you get into probably a little bit more, and it feeds into LP farming. I guess what I'm saying is everything is so brand new and people are so critical, but things haven't even started yet. It's such an infant stage. And I think the creativity of the communities and the people that are working on Pulse Chain are creating stuff that is absolutely amazing, and it always looks good. It always has so many good tools around it. Think about how many things people built just off of the Hex staking mechanism, right? How many charts and graphs and so much stuff has been built on that. Now you're starting to get all these shiny new tools that are going to be really start to get into the leveraging DeFi like it's supposed to be. And there's some charts floating around too of the Hex or the PulseX ecosystem on Pulse Chain and all the different tools and projects that are coming out. Some good, some much better than others. I'm not going to, say anything else beyond that, but there's a lot of interesting tools that are coming out. And I'm really excited about liquid loans because this is a way for me personally. I don't want to sell my Pulse. I don't want to sell my Pulse X. I don't want to sell certain things. Now I'll full disclosure. I've been doing ratio trading. I was there when it first launched. I was doing tons of ratio trading. I was doing LP farming. The ultimate goal was to build up my Pulse and Pulse X bags. I don't want to sell. I'm not going to sell here at these low levels. If anybody's selling at these levels now, not financial advice, but you got to take a step back and ask yourself, do you think you're leaving a little early to the party? Meaning like it hasn't even started yet. And so this is going to allow me to lock up my coins that I don't want to get rid of. And I can just sit on them and still earn yield and lock them up. And there's so many little tricks that we're going to have to get into here on this that just sit back. I mean, we know there's going to be a run up. We know there's going to be a run up coming in the market at some point. You can't keep this thing down forever. And agree or disagree on when the time is going to happen. But there's a reason why all the technology industries are doing all this stuff behind closed doors. You're not going to see it on 60 Minutes. You're not going to see it on anywhere else talking about what's going on right now because the people that are doing these things don't want people knowing about it. So there's so many strategies going on right now between companies and corporations getting into, all the different nuances of crypto, whether it's the lending, whether it's, stable coins, whether it's the GameFi aspect, man, all this stuff is getting connected right now in the infrastructure that even most people don't understand. It's not sexy but guess what? Creating the network protocol for dApps to all communicate or that use those things, now it got really cool. And that's where we're at such an infant stage. I think people need to just understand that what's coming. And I'm excited about this piece because I see it. When you see stuff like this, you know what's coming. So I think people need to be really excited about liquid loans. And based on the some of the feedback we've already been getting, how people are pretty psyched about it, I think they have every right to be. It's going to be really exciting to see how this thing launches. All right, let's get into some strategies. These aren't all the strategies. I just threw out some strategies here that I know are pretty common and stuff like this. So there's a strategy. The first one is, hey, you guys should already know this. You're borrowing. You put USD in there. I lock it up. I take out Pulse out of my vault, right? Or I lock up my Pulse and I get my USDL. I take my USDL, I go to redemption, I convert my USDL for Pulse, then I go right back to the vault, and you can go into this process here. WaLLrus, you want to talk about this one here on the haunted strategy that seems to be a lot of people are talking about?
Sure. So one little caveat there, you're actually not going to do a redemption. You're actually going to go purchase Pulse on market. So what you would do is you'll take the USDL. The way the haunted works is basically like a 1.1% leverage. So let's quickly hit leverage because it'll be really important for a lot of these concepts here. So leverage can also just be think of as like efficiency, right? So there's certain things we want over collateralized for safety, like stable coins, and there's certain things where we want to be really efficient in systems. So that's where fractional reserves actually come from. Now they've been perverted and ruined a million ways, and I'm sure we all know those. But where it originally came from was efficiency, right? It was, hey, if we can maintain this float at 80%, well, then we have 20% less dormant capital that's out doing stuff. And then eventually it spirals into what we have, and there's an issue there, right? But initially it comes from that idea of efficiency. So some of the things, again, like we talked about earlier with liquidations is, a liquidation is in this system is really different than liquidations that give us heart attacks when we think about leverage trading. The other is when we talk about like leverage trading, the way we sort of conventionally think of it, it basically starts at like 1.5, if not 2x, is like the lowest leverage on most platforms. LL almost can't even go that far. Like you can't even really take it to a 2x, but there's a little way you kind of can. But again, you're getting into some goofy stuff there. So leverage in LL is it stops before leverage that we sort of colloquially think of even begins. So they're very, very different things. So where you have with the haunted strategy is basically like a 10% leverage, a 1.1. So the way haunted presents it is that you would basically go at 1,000%. Take your USDL and buy Pulse. And basically you just hold that position. And then every time you get up and you get back around to 1,000, you basically reset. So as it keeps going up in price, you keep scraping, and it gives you this again this minor leverage on top of PLS. So the way that you take, again, kind of true leverage, is to take USDL, buy the pulse, and then add it back to the vault, or just hold it. You could do either way.
But the caveat there is, what's really great about it is it goes into the same concept without, you're not just taking more pulse off the market. You're constantly taking more and more pulse off the market and locking it up, which is another reason, like we talked about in the last slide, it's going to take pulse off the market. That's the whole point, because you're yielding on it. So that's a great strategy. I like it. It's simplistic. It's not complicated. You don't have to overthink that. It's pretty straightforward. I know I put in here you could swap for USDL or DCA, but ultimately you could do the same thing with USDL. You can just sit tight, wait for the pulse to make moves, and then you could DCA in. You could do that as well if you want to. Obviously, we all know that strategy. It's pretty straightforward. You should always be DCAing in for most points. At least I certainly do. There's another concept where you could take that USDL, or do you see any reasons why you would actually trade another address? Like you would want to then you have one address and you create another address. You would want to spread around your vaults. Do you see any strategies around that why you would actually want to create multiple addresses to have multiple vaults? I'm just curious.
Not
except for security purposes, obviously.
I was going to say there's a few fringe cases, but if you're doing that correctly, you don't need my help with it. You're already getting into some pretty advanced stuff. So you could go through and do that to set different liquidation levels if you were taking the USDL off market. So you can get into a few places where it makes sense. But I mean, we'd be talking about like literally single digit percentages would even make sense to explore. But you can break it down for the security reasons. And if you were going to take that USDL, so again, if you don't have access to it, if you were going to convert it, spend it somewhere else, there might be reasons why you want to have a tier system on that liquidation event.
All right, nice. Now, I know I wanted to put this in here just because no matter what option you're doing, you really want to take in consideration that your ratio in which you've taken your loan out on. Now, we talked about this. Now, what strategies are you seeing? Because I mean, I've seen some things. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on this. Now, ICR, why would you create a risky, low percentage, ICR percentage versus one that would be a little more safer? Like, what strategies are you seeing? Because I know there's a lot of communications that are happening on like the media, Telegram, and all these other stuff, different strategies. I'm curious to know what you have to speak on that.
Yeah. So this is actually, again, when we talked about, hey, like listen to the strategies and kind of extract some parts that are useful. This is, I think, a really useful area. So again, you can look at leverage or fractional reserve, again, kind of, which facet we're looking at as efficiency. So when we look at the collateral ratios, let's say we'll use big numbers because it makes it easier with big numbers, right? So I've got $10 million worth of pulse. Okay. I want to make my vault. Okay. Let's say, and I pull out $100,000 and I'm going to go collect yield. That's like 1%, right? Like it's very, very small amount. So I'm having to lock up 10 million to only have 100K out in the market doing something effective. Okay. Now I have, essentially no risk, but I'm not, again, I still have a lot of dormant capital. Okay. So let's jump it up to 5 million. Okay. Now, now I'd be at a 200%, and now I've got 5 million. So now I've got orders of magnitude more value in the market. So when we start to think about these ratios, the reasons to be aggressive on ICR is because you're wanting to be efficient with that value to do whatever the other task is. So, but when we talk about this, the first two things to think about with this collateral ratio and where we're going, one is your individual skill, and it matters in a couple of ways. And some of that goes into also just how much time, right? So like, if you're somebody who's watching these videos and you're hanging out with the rest of us goons every single day, okay, that's a very different than somebody who's, you check deck screener once a week and, you hop on Twitter to see who's yelling at each other. Okay, well then, okay, you naturally lean up safer, right? Like that's a very different conversation. But when we're talking about kind of a more sophisticated user, they can be more aggressive because it's efficient. The other part is how liquid is the USDL or whatever we're turning it into, right? So if you're going to take this and let's say you're going to go buy a house with it. So you're going to like use an LL as a like traditional kind of style loan and you go buy a house. Okay. Well, when I go buy a house, that USDL is off, right? So if I take 500K, I go buy the house. I don't have 500K to just add back, right? So now I would need to be at a position where I'm safe and think about, okay, how am I going to repay this? Am I okay being liquidated at some point from this? Like, what am I trying to achieve here, right? So when we look through this again, first part is skill, and then again the other part is how liquid are we. So if you say again we have a more sophisticated user, if they're going to have 20-30% in the stability pool and they've got another chunk that's in LP and then they've got 10-15% that they're buying Hex with, doing a Hex stake for every 30 days, scraping off the yield, some variation of that, right? So if they have those funds that are relatively liquid and on chain, well, now I can be really aggressive because as soon as that price moves, I would just unstake from stability pool, put some back. Oh, I got a big hit in the stability pool. I got pulse. I take pulse off and I recap. So if you're managing it as a position and you're a sophisticated user, again, having understand these things, right? And you have these assets on chain, I can be, again, aggressive or efficient and be at that lower collateral ratio because I can quickly adjust that position and I'm doing things and I want to be able to get as much yield as possible. Now, again, if you're not as savvy, you go safer. If you if you're less liquid, you go safer. And if you barely understand what we're talking about, you're super, super safe. Or maybe you don't even use that side at all yet. And you go through and you get in the stability pool and you plan to, and like, you work your way up to being that super safe level. So you don't even have to start with, I'm going to open a vault with live ammo, right? So you can always literally do these other things. But when it comes to the vault side, again, it starts with less savvy, you go safer. You want to be less hands-on, you go safer. You're going to be less liquid, you want to be safer.
Makes a lot of sense, but just curiosity. I mean, I know it's not financial advice, but so let's say you're a user. I guess for me, I'm to be extra risky. Like I couldn't understand, like, if you're going to take out the minimum, the MCR, like if you're going to take out 110%, I just feel like that. There's people that are going to do it. There's going to be people that do that. But
so when I say aggressive, I'm talking 150. Like,
okay, there we
below
go.
200.
Okay.
Like below 200 to me, that's an aggressive user. Like
okay,
if you're below say 200, it just is a rough threshold. Like if you're taking that and you're going to Vegas to party on that money, that's a risky play. Like if you're illiquid with that, I would say that's risky. Like if you, again, it's one of those, some of those, if you're listening for some context, if you're going to be in that 100 and change, you need to already know what you're doing. Like you shouldn't be having to, you can listen for insights and, maybe some adaptations, but you should have a handle on how you're moving that. But yeah, like at 110, like there's zero reason to ever just, well, everyone can do what they want. I would not ever take one out anywhere close to that. I mean, I don't really even know why you would originate one for less than 120, 130 as like a, whatever you're on an edge case doing something. There's really no need to be there. But again, if you're managing that position, then again, that 150 to 200%, there's reasons to do that if you're savvy. And the savvy also plays in two roles here that I think is interesting, and people kind of need to have some self-reflection. So usually I pick Axis, just he's one of the TA guys that I happen to really like a lot. So he's always my go-to guy as a point. I'm just going to take a guess and assume that Axis is probably better at TA and picking out some yield play than I am. It's just probably a safe bet. He's a savvy dude. He's really, really good at that stuff. So someone like Axis, one, he does this stuff all the time. Very, very, intuitive, all this. So not only is he going to be able to manage that position well, but he's also probably going to be really good at generating the yield. So just as round numbers, not only would an Axis type guy be able to be more aggressive, but if we give Axis 100K and me 100K and say, hey, go find yield, he's probably going to get more. So there's also a little more benefit to those players being kind of aggressive. So that skill plays into not just, hey, can you maintain this position safely, but also how beneficial is it to go get those extra couple percent, right? So if you're going through this and you're early on, I mean, if you haven't done this, if you don't do this very often, if you don't trade, any of these kind of safety things, just assume that that you're not going to be doing anything that's going to be life changing when it comes to, no, I can push it to 180. Don't do that. Just be safe. If you're even having to work through that stuff, just lean towards safety. Just default to being conservative. You can always get more aggressive, right? So just again, I think it goes into there just people being self-aware, understanding why you would be aggressive in the first place. If you're a buy and hold it guy and you this is all entertainment and you just, you're big in the ecosystem, and be in hundreds. Like there's not even, you could just skip this whole section, just be in 500 plus and just take the easy money, move around and be super conservative.
Agreed. Basically, yeah, I agree. Know your risk. So I think what you were saying, but you were alluding to was basically this chart here. So like basically you could take this, do a very low ICR, which keep in mind, if you're taking low ICRs, you got to be thinking like a day trader mentality. You got to be really locked in on what's going on here because you have to understand it. But you could take this, you could then mint, go straight into the LP pools, capture some of those high LPs when they're coming out and try to extract that and then feed it back into here to try to push up your ICR percentage, or have this as ammo in case this does start to drop a little low, and you could use that to push up that ICR percentage on your vault. You could do that. Once again, what WaLLrus is saying is know your risk, and if you don't know your risk, then it's probably means you probably should not be taking a lot of risk. Okay, so that's probably the safe bet there. Not financial advice. All right. Option 2, I'd like to get into the arbitrage scenario here because the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because it's fascinating because you guys did go into a lot of depth here, and I was understanding the USDL, and I understand how it could become depegged, but then it would then get pushed back to be correlated again.
Mm-hmm.
But you guys are using, which Oracle you guys are going to be using, and there's a backup one as well for another Oracle price that could come in. And I want to give these little caveats here because these are like more specifics that you guys outlined that I thought were really good, interesting information here around the Oracle and what triggers, what event, what happened. Like you guys have really thought about a lot of different scenarios that have gone on. So you guys have had to done a ton of R&R to understand all this. So it's really fascinating. Would you like to elaborate a little bit on this one?
Yeah. Do you want to start on the ARB stuff, or you want to get into the Oracles? Where do you want to go?
Let's start with the arbitrage one first.
Nice. So with the arbitrage, you have traditional, like very technical arbitrage is basically buying and selling in one and buying and selling in another location where there's a spread in the price. So in case when people, take a little crypto history, that's actually where SBF and some of those guys claim, at least they originally made their money, was something called the kimchi premium. And it was because before, again, some of these dexes and things we talk about, traditionally, there was a few percentage spread between Bitcoin exchanges in the US and in Japan. So people were able to buy at that low and then basically ARB over in Japan. And it was called the kimchi premium. And anyway, so that was kind of the OG arbitrage event in crypto. But there's arbitrage in all kinds of things. So in general, when we see the arbitrage where there's extra kind of mechanics around USDL than there is a normal coin, is that redemption. So anytime that you see USDL below $1, you'd be able to purchase that, and you could wait for the price to kind of go back on its own. There might be other pools, so you could do sort of traditional arbitrage strategies. But in general, what you would do is, as you kind of have laid out there, is that you would take it back and redeem it. So what any stable coin is worth is whatever the LP pool says it is. USDC is not $1.
I'm sorry, Watch. I lost you there for a second.
Okay, are we good?
Yeah, we're good. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So USDT, USDC, they're not $1 because they're $1. They're $1 because the LP says they're worth $1. So if you go and pull up a stablecoin price, you can see how that chart still moves up and down. Now it stays very, very close because, again, I can go redeem it for $1. So why would I pay you $1.05 and why would I sell it for 95? Any of these variations. So when you look at that extra redemption gives you this opportunity to basically take the spread. So early on, that first 14 days where redemptions aren't on, it's going to be more volatile. So again, there's that opportunity for people who are savvy, want to sit and watch the LP pools. So where, again, the one-on-one for the kind of entertainment side is, all right, so Nate's a big whale. He's a hitter. He comes in and he takes out $1 million USDL loan. He's a savage. This is normal stuff for him. just a Thursday afternoon, he's just feeling spicy. He goes in and he says, you know what? I want to buy the PulseX dip. So he buys PulseX. So let's say this is really, really early. So $1 million buy early on, that would push the USDL price down because he sold it, right? And then pushes the PulseX price up. So let's say that it was 101 right at $1. He makes that big sell and it pushes it down to 93 cents. So you could go through there and buy that 93 cents up. And then again, now everybody tends to again, there's other participants. So you could just wait, see if it goes back up to $1 and take it, or you could take it directly and go redeem it in the system. Once that 14 days is over, then you could go and redeem it and take the pulse out. So there's all those traditional ARB opportunities. There'll be a bigger spread that first 14 days. And then the redemption is that, that stopgap for the peg protection, but kind of gives you an extra facet around arbitrage.
Nice. I like it a lot. Yeah. So on the other systems that you guys were seeing on the Ethereum network, I'm assuming they have a stable coin built into their system. How often did you see it become, or what's the wide ranges that you were seeing between depegging, and how often was it really occurring to have those wider ranges?
So whenever you have something that's DeFi based, it's going to have like USDC, USDT DAI. These have massive LPs and massive user bases and all kinds of value around them. So when you look at LUSD, which is the stable coin from Liquidity, it has never truly depegged and been off in la la land, something really far off. But it is going to have a wider spread than what you would see with USDC or USDT. So those, for again several different market factors, I mean, they're going to stay really, really tight. LUSD, you'll see it fluctuate more in standard about 97 cents to like 103. So again, it's going to stay inside tight in that sense of a peg, but it is going to be just, again, especially early, it can be very, very volatile relative to a stable coin. But in the future, you're just going to see that it still has a wider tolerance than a traditional stable coin.
All right. Now, do you forecast what USDL might do? I know it's speculating, but I didn't know if you guys had your own theories.
I don't see anything that would really change it dramatically. The bigger the systems get, the more liquidity, the more mature markets get. And this is for every arbitrage or any kind of like spread event like that.
Yep.
The more advanced the users get, the more mature the markets get, the tighter those ranges get. So, and if we take some of the Hex stuff, we see the Maxi, Deci, Team, some of those derivatives, or like the Hedron HSI price, we see those get really far away from what, spot value of Hex, these things, right? We see these things get far apart. I mean, they could be 10, 20%. If you go look at, like say Bitcoin between every exchange, they're never 10% off. I mean, that is a very odd, rare event. Like there's something almost going on there. So the more liquidity, the more mature markets get, those ranges get tighter because there's some player willing to take 2%, so it doesn't get to 3%. And so they tend to get tighter over time. So I would imagine, again, loose guess, this isn't inside baseball, this is just speculation from WaLLrus, that I would say that first 14 days, you're going to get some craziness. We naturally always do. It'll instantly tighten way back up after that. And that in that same thing, that you're going to see more of a tolerance than you're traditionally used to seeing with USDC, USDT, or DAI, but that it's still very tight and does exactly what you want it to do.
All right, nice. Now, you want to dive into the oracles? Because I thought this was fascinating how you guys basically are getting your price feeds from Pulse USD, and then the fallback's going to be, you have the PulseX Pulse USD Oracle, but then you can obviously see the layout that I have here. Would you like to walk through this? Because to me, this is, like I said, you guys are really giving it some thought on the different layers to ensure that the system stays stable.
So the Fetch that we built Fetch. It's a decentralized Oracle. It's based mostly off the Teller infrastructure. We're actually going to have an update coming on that very, very soon. Really, really neat mechanics. So we could do that. I mean, it's its own baby. I mean, we could talk the full length of time, but just to kind of explain why the Oracle is important and where it really ties in here with LL is, so I'll walk through this a little more kit style because I think this is a good learning experience. So if I said, what's the price of Pulse? And where would you go look?
Deck screener, most likely.
Deck screener? Okay. Where does that price come from?
All the data on chain.
All of it? Like every LP pool everywhere?
I would think so.
So it probably actually doesn't. It probably only pulls from 1 or 2 pools and maybe only 1 pool. So again, the reason the trick question is like, what is the price, right? So if we think about more traditional items, price of eggs, the same eggs, they're priced different where you're at and where I'm at. So what's the price? So, and the reason to kind of work through some of this stuff is,
Well, the generic answer is basically whoever's willing to pay for the last price, that's the price.
but pay where? The last one that paid in USDC pulse?
Exactly.
Or
No,
DAI,
exactly.
right?
Well, it's based on what data pool are you pulling your information from? Like you
Right.
could have another pool going on in another location that you're not pulling from that's setting different prices. Exactly. So I know where you're going. So go ahead,
Yep.
WaLLrus, speak on it.
So the reason that this is, again, this isn't like meant to trip anyone up. It's we can explain it simply, but the idea is like, oh, that's interesting. Where does that price come from, right? Now, again, as we kind of talked about with arbitrage in general, we don't get these crazy swings in more mature markets. So maybe on some kind of small coin, but something like PLS, it's got big liquidity. If it's, again, if there's a pool over here where pulse is $1, I'm going to sell all the pulse I have until that price corrects. And then I'm going to go buy it back cheaper somewhere else, right? Like that's that ARB event. So, but when we're looking at an Oracle and we want the price, now LL is immutable. So how we get that price is really important. So let's say that we go and take the USDC PLS pool on PulseX. Okay. If USDC has a problem, now LL broke. If the bridge that we bridged in USDC has a problem on, now LL broke. If we decide, hey, USDC sucks, or they decide to rebrand, they're going to relaunch as USDCC. Well, now it doesn't work. If there's an issue on PulseX, again, we saw that we went from V1 to V2, that split some liquidity, but if that liquidity moved, that would break LL. So how we get that price is really, really important because it's one of those things that, again, as users, we don't really have those kind of constraints, but it's really important to build that rigidity and safety into the protocol. So that's where Fetch comes in. And again, we can dig into the really neat side of why like the decentralization and why Fetch is really, really cool on its own. But the idea of the Oracle is that the Oracle can basically pick where that best price source is, similar like what you see on Deck Screener, and it gives you the ability to dispute. So the Oracle reports that price, and then it allows people to dispute. So that gets handled decentralized. But that idea is to build in rigidity. So now if there's a DEX changes, LL's fine. If there's an issue with the particular stablecoin, LL's fine. If the LP just moves for a certain reason, LL's fine. If the DEX or if the bridge has a problem, LL's fine. So that pricing mechanic there, it's one of those things that as users, it's so simple. There's not issues. Who cares? No big deal. But when you're building something that you cannot change, that you don't want to have all these externalities with, that's actually a very difficult thing to really be nuanced and build correctly. So that's the reason that you use an Oracle. And then there's a backup Oracle. Now, again, same kind of thing with Liquidity. That same mechanic is there. It has never hit the backup Oracle. But again, you build stuff because you want to be bulletproof, right? Like things in crypto are always trying to be broken. You got to build things people can't break, not things that just don't break. So then you add a few things in there. So the price not being updated, that's what we would like, the kind of terminology is a stale price. And basically LL has that where if, again, we talked about all these other redundancies. If Fetch had a problem, LL will pull. If you see that revert and you get an invalid price, and that's where basically it's seeing something malicious and like the API, that data feed, it will pull. Or when you get those consecutive price updates. So that price update there is something broke, right? So the way that an Oracle goes in, if you see it move 50% more than that, like in back-to-back report, like something's not right, and it's going to revert back. So it builds in a few of those provisions to give all this rigidity to LL so that it doesn't have basically a half dozen single points of infrastructure failure. So I know that's a ton to throw at everybody, but essentially what means is that, again, the Oracle always is giving the most decentralized, cleanest DeFi pricing into LL, and it being able to do it this way means that there's not central control. So we don't have the ability to go in there and manually change what LP pulls when fetch is up. Everybody has the ability to dispute. So again, it opens up this mechanic to giving a lot of rigidity and not having to give admin key and sort of a central point of failure.
Great job, WaLLrus. It's a tough one to try to wrap up and
It's a lot.
such
It's a lot.
short thing. It's really difficult. I know. We could have a very long discussion around oracles and things.
Let
Like,
me
oh yeah.
let me try and wrap that up from what I understood it on a peanut brain level. So basically, there's a lot of eyes, different eyes that are looking at all the different arbitrage prices and saying this is the best one, and then then it goes that direction to the best one. But then they're also looking at each other, making sure that they're all working, and they're all separate. So therefore, you can't have a collusion of like 10 of them trying to make one go bad, right? Because even then there's going to be multiple other ones saying, no, you guys are actually going bad, right? And so there will always be a correct answer because there's just way too many looking at each other and keeping each other honest, so to say.
Yeah. So again, without getting into too much of the real specifics around fetch, it really works really similar to proof of stake. So in an Oracle, those eyes are called a reporter, and they're just like a validator. So if a validator does a double spend or a bad transaction, they get slashed. And the same thing happens in fetch. So if the price is 4 zeros and a 4, whatever pulse is, if a reporter said, hey, it's $1, the other those other oracles would challenge, they call it a dispute, and then that reporter would get slashed. So it really functions very much like its own little blockchain, but rather than processing transactions, it's feeding out pricing information. So it can, like we're going to have like sports betting is going to be on Pulse Chain, and it'll end up using fetch to say, hey, who won the Cowboys game? Well, how do we know? Fetch said, and then if it was wrong, they would get slashed. So all that kind of feeding information into different DeFi contracts can be done through fetch. It's really, really cool tech.
That is actually really awesome, and that's one of the things that makes this type of technology, in crypto and innovating that way, just so fantastic.
Yeah, it's definitely worth it. Again, we can, maybe that's another reason to hop on. I'm always looking for an excuse to hang out with you guys. Like we can go on through fetch. So we're going to have, again, a big update. It'll come out shortly. We have a full front end. There's fetch tokens. I mean, it is its own baby, and it is really, really amazing. We have a certain way that we're going to kind of stage it out. Some really, again, we'll get into more of the weeds. Again, most of the stuff's out. We ran it on testnet. Again, it has its own, website, tokenomics, cool stuff. It's really beautiful tech.
I'm excited, man. You guys are definitely FOMOing things up. That's nice. Really good. Option 3 we already talked about. That's basically, there's going to be guys out here creating bots for this. Let's face it. That's what's going to be happening. They're going to be sniping those using bots. Option 4, this is basically just using the system. Go ahead and earn your Pulse, your SDL. Go ahead and use the stability. Go ahead and earn. Go ahead and just use the protocol like it's intended. Don't get too cute with it, and just yield on your positions. It's basically what option 4 would be at that point. I wanted to dive into kind of like my personal thoughts about all this, because I mean, it really was a lot to take in. Okay.
Can I jump on 4 real quick before we roll on?
Absolutely.
So the other part about the stability pool to me is if you're going to be doing any of the either the kind of user or in that frame where you're going to be a little more aggressive on your collateral ratio, or if you're again, I almost always like to use like Hex and Pulse just because I know that's going to hit most users. It's the same variation for other stuff, but I just, want to use familiar terms. So for example, like let's say that we were going to take out that USDL and we're going to do like a rolling Hex stake. Okay. So, we can unstake, but again, at a certain point, there's penalties. That's probably not what we really want to do. So one of the ways that you can make that management easy is the stability pool. So that's a way to be getting some level of yield. Now, is it going to be as crazy as, whatever the new hotness is? Probably not. But the reason the stability pool has the advantage is that inside of the single DApp, as we saw when we walked through it, unstake, click, repay, boom. And so one DApp, a few clicks, and you're able to modulate that position. So especially as people are working through, one, you can just, again, as it says there, you could just put it in the stability pool. But if you're again using this to go chase other yield where it's a little less liquid, there's penalties to remove, or maybe it's just cumbersome, right? Just some timeliness. The stability pool is a great first wave, and it's the first honeypot that I'm going to be using to kind of repay back. So again, just for framing, I might take 20% of whatever it is I pull out, put it in the stability pool, and then the other 80% I'm doing XYZ over here as that price comes down, rather than unstaking LP tokens or trying to end at this or move these other things, or even maybe sell if I was buying a dip. I'm going to start with that stability pool and come moving back. And then I could kind of modulate from there. So that's my first wave of modifying that vault or adjusting for the price of Pulse going down.
Nice. All right. Appreciate that, WaLLrus, for clearing that up, because I definitely, you got a lot of great insight. I definitely want to capture as much as you have. So I do appreciate it, man. All right, personal thoughts. All right, it took me a while to go through all this stuff, really study it, go through it. And I guess my 2 cents for this. I'm me personally, I definitely will be leveraging the LP that comes out in those first 42 days, because I feel like any LPs, I mean, that's right in my wheelhouse personally. I'd be jumping into LPs, gaining those percentages. Typically LPs, you're going to get the highest percentages. First people in are be gaining those high percentages. As more people jump into the pool, that percentage is going to start to drop. It's just more hands in the cookie jar, basically. So you want to try to capture that as much as you can at the very beginning. I will definitely be personally dumping into probably providing. Go ahead and get some vaults going. Go ahead and get everything in the ecosystem. Go ahead and get those, like Nate likes to say, money printers in place. Setting up those, get the bit to perpetual system going. Start seeing how everything's working. See how it's going to react. I also want to get in there because I also think, personally for me, I think you're going to have some people get in there, and you're still going to have people that don't understand what they're doing. I think you're going to get some people are going to get in here. We already talked recovery mode. It's not going to probably happen because it's extremely rare, but you're going to get people going in there doing the dumb thing, like 110%. They're going to do it. They're not going to, they didn't read, they didn't check out what they're doing. So these are going to get, liquidated. And then those are going to be, coming over to the people in the system. I want to capture those percentages. I want to capture, human error. Sorry, I hate to say that, but people don't do their due diligence and they're going to make mistakes. I want to capture, and I want to basically leverage those mistakes. I want to be in that. I'm not too sure now if I want to go this high now, talking to you, WaLLrus. I'm leaning toward maybe I want to go a little lower, just because I mean, let's face it, I don't want to be, I monitor stuff probably definitely daily. I'm behind a computer all day long, so I have no problem. Somebody who's not behind a computer all day, I get it. One thing that I am curious about, is there a way to have alert notifications or anything set up in the system to tell us when, certain thresholds or percentages have been triggered and all? Is that part of the DApp as well?
So it's not in the DApp. For a lot of people, you can use Deck Screener and go set price alerts. So you get that liquidation price and those things. So you can go through there and set. Now there's a few little caveats, like if you have redemptions that go in. So there's some minor changes. So you'd always want to give yourself a small cushion, but price alerts work really well for that in the beginning. And then again, we'll see how much kind of sophisticated stuff comes around on top.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be some things getting created. Now I know people people who sacrifice, they may or may not get a loan token. I understand. I get it. I'd be curious to see how people are going to treat that loan token. When they do start generating it out of the system, or wherever how they get the loan token, are they just going to dump it? Are they going to treat it like an incentive because they don't understand the functionality behind it? It'll be interesting what the loan token is going to come out at, right? Because the loan token's price is going to fluctuate. You saw it with the incentive token when PulseX came out. It did exactly. I'm not saying it because I mean, it's common sense, but you knew it was going to happen. It's like it's happened on all the other incentive tokens that come out. And I'm not calling loan token an incentive token. I'm thinking that people are going to think it's an incentive token and they might treat it as such. And that's the thing you got to look at. So one thing I'd like to be watching is that price on that loan token. I know when the incentive token came out on the LPs when on PulseX launched, it spiked just like most incentive tokens do on all these, um, liquidity farms. They spike, they have these massive spikes, and then people just start to sell them off. And there's a reason why that pattern always stays true. But it also gets to a point where it bottoms out, and then people start to buy it up, and then it starts to add. People start leveraging it and using it. So it's something to keep your eye on. I would definitely tell people to watch that loan token price, because if it comes out and people start doing stupid, either driving the price up quickly, you might get a knee-jerk reaction. It may run up, you might have a dump, you might have a vice versa. Just watch it. There's always opportunities. If anything I've seen on PulseX is there's always a token or something in the system that nobody gets any love. It was PulseX there for a little while. It's getting no love. It was losing its ratio against all the other tokens out in the system, which is why, I mean, me personally, Pulse Chain launched, I dumped all my PulseX, switched it straight into Pulse and some other tokens. And now I was DCAing back into those positions because it was simple. Everybody got PulseX, they dumped, they moved it in. Knowing where the money is going to go and knowing what people are already thinking helps a lot. I'm not trying to get cute here. Like I said, this is more strategic. This is more, watching this closely. If you're not going to be watching closely, like WaLLrus said, know your risk ratios. Just don't do stupid if you don't feel comfortable doing any of this stuff. Me personally, I watch things closely. I'm going to really watch how things are going to be handled. But right out of the gate, I want to be in the system. I want to have a vault. I want to be earning my yields. I want to be in the LPs. I want to be exposed to everything as soon as possible because I want to capitalize on all the reasons I've already stated. But then at the same time, maybe also as if I'm accumulating coins or yield, I might be sticking it on the sideline waiting for opportunities, because opportunities will present themselves. Is it because maybe, I don't know, maybe the loan token has a little bit of a nice dip, or something else has a dip? You can rest assured there's always going to be people moving tokens around like you're already seeing on PulseX. So keep this in mind when you get into these systems. Like I said, ultimately, I'm holding Pulse. I'm holding PulseX. I like the liquid loan system, how it's being set up. To me, it's a no-brainer. I'm going to be absolutely using it heavily. It's another reason why I gave a disclosure on our channels that we were talking with everybody. I stated about a month ago that I was getting out of all liquid LP positions, and I was just basically doing ratio trading, building up positions, because I'm ready for liquid loans to launch. I've already been preparing. So when it launches, what I want to get right now is I want USDL. Why? Because I'm already sitting on Pulse. I need that USDL PLS pair so I can start getting in on day one. Question for you, WaLLrus. When is USDL going to be available?
So, is that a cloaked when launch question?
You can call it what you want.
So yeah, again, we're going to be out in October. We're going to have some kind of like contest marketing stuff that'll be really, really enjoyable. We're going to put out some more information on how Fetch is going to come through. So Fetch has to come out ahead of time. So we already have Pulse Chain Safe, which is that lightweight multi-sig that we built. It's out. It's free. Everyone can go check it out. PulseChainSafe.com. Then we'll have Fetch, and then LL. So all this will be out in October. A couple of cool things to chime on there. One on the first one. The other one's just kind of a general thing that I don't think enough people kind of work through. So first of all, on that USDL PLSLP, especially for people who want to take advantage of that early incentive there, or just want to take advantage of the pool. So one thing is, if you aren't a very large player, so again, we talk about the minimums being 2K, it comes out to about 2,200 with the origination for liquidation, and then you'd want some space, right? So to some degree, I mean, you'd have to kind of allocate, let's say for the average cat, at least $3 or $4 grand. To everybody, that could be a decent chunk of your portfolio, right? And especially if you're a newer user, you maybe even want more. Again, we can kind of get into some of that side there. So if you are either a smaller bag holder or you're watching this, you're in the vibe, you think a lot of this stuff's cool, but you're just still not that comfortable with the collateral ratio side of it, one thing you can do to participate is you can just go buy the USDL on market and then pair it with your pulse on the LP. So you don't actually have to open the vault. So, Tracker, Nate, guys like me, we'll be playing with all these different kinds of things in the system. But if you're someone who's looking through these things and you're, again, on the safer side, more on the maxi for RH tokens, and you're like, okay, I'm willing to play a little of the game, but I don't trust you guys like that. The LP is a spot where you can go through, buy a little USD on market, have a smaller position, all those kind of caveats. So there's a few ways to, again, be on the outside of the system if you don't want to take the lending function. So just a caveat there. And then the other on some of the things we were talking about with like the yield and loan token. This is really true of Hex, single-sided staking is another a big one, but I don't think this really gets hit enough in crypto, and in crypto there's a lot of volatility, so I think it's really important. Anytime that you're getting paid a yield in something that's risk on, the value kind of in that yield also depends on when you sell. So if you're holding an annuity and you get paid $100 a month, it's $100 every month, right? Okay. But if you get a Hex stake and you get 100 Hex tokens, that price moves up and down a ton. So one of the things when you're looking at like APRs or these ratios is if what you're being yielded in is also risk on, if it's, loan, Hex, Pulse X, Pulse, any of these other things, you can say, hey, I had a 10% yield. Okay. But it was only if you sold it right then. So if it goes down, you would have yielded less. But if it triples, you'd make more. So just one of those things, again, as people are working through strategies, is you kind of hit on a few times, Tracker, that, hey, sometimes I'm kind of looking for the yield. Other times I'm more like building up a position. So if you're in that kind of building up a position mode, then that's something to kind of like think about as you're looking at these yields, is either maybe you want to get them into something that's risk on, or again, just kind of looking at those payouts that if you get, you're taking a loan incentive, if you take it and sell it, it's there right there. If loan goes up 100x, okay, well then that yield would be way higher. That may be a reason to hold on. If it crashes to the bottom, never comes up again, then you wouldn't have kind of extracted that value. So just one of those other mind states that whenever you're getting paid yield in something that's risk on, you need to think about that sell event as well if you're like trying to work out dollars on that stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, it's it's a lot to take in. Now, when you're dealing with all the different possibilities here, but I don't know. I personally think that I like the strategy with the LP getting in. I like that. I like getting into the borrowing of the actual system, and then just like anything else, you want to get your feet wet. You want to get exposed to it. But my question to you though, like one thing that I was curious about, when will USD? So let's just talk. Forget dates. We know that October. You guys have already announced Liquid Loans is coming out in October, but you also have to, which is a huge announcement, which was fantastic. CC came out, it was good stuff.
Yeah.
Question on that, when you say Liquid Loans has to launch, now you stated it, so I want to be clear here. So first the Oracle has to come out, right? Then what will come out next? Would it be USDL? Will it be just the Liquid Loans protocol launching and then USDL, or how is that going to work? Like, so what order have you guys? What kind of order do you guys seeing this coming out?
So Fetch has to be out. So Fetch launch, and then we basically get that initial reporter network up, a little bit of time. When I say time, you sort of like a theoretical time. You could do it hours. I mean, it could be, hey, Fetch is up, reporters, ding, 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 lights turn on, you pull the trigger and you launch the protocol. Realistically, there'll be a few days. We're always gonna do more testing. You guys know we're super conservative on everything. We're gonna go through all that stuff. But there won't be much of a time gap between Fetch being live and then LL. And for LL, basically it's a light switch. I mean, again, there's some order of operations, but essentially like all token distribution, protocol open, contracts launch, just lights on essentially. It's very, very quick. And then USDL, as soon as one of you guys go mint it. So there's no like minting process. There's not like an inflation or anything. The USDL, it exists the second the first vault opens and someone hits the button. Okay, gotcha. So in order even to buy USDL on the open market, the whole process has to start first. So it's not gonna get created until somebody creates the first vault, and then that's going to create a supply, and then it's going to start to become on the market. So it's going to be okay. Understand, that makes a lot of sense then. Okay. Yep.
All right, which goes back to my original strategy. It's what I kind of thought too. So I'm going to probably get that vault in right away, get my USDL out, then remaining pulse that I have on the side, create my pair, and then go ahead and do the LP farming. Gotcha. Yep, that's what I was expecting. So, yep, which plays into the same strategy. Why I think that LP is going to be a very high percentage when it first comes out, based on it, because it's going to take time for USDL to get out there enough. So it's going to reward those people. Really, if you think about it, the only people who are going to get USDL first are going to be the people who create the vault. So they're going to be the first ones to get it. Thus, you're going to be the first one to get into the LPs and capture those high percentages. And then, of course, as news spreads, things are going to start to go. Okay. Yep. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
The way that I look at that tracker and the way I have been looking at it with my strategy actually being very similar to yours, because obviously like DeFi Kingdoms was the same sort of deal, right? Where you get those high APRs real quick. We happened to accidentally find Chirp, and that worked out real good for us as well. The way that I'm looking at this right now, though, is like it's the opening of a bank, and you have a lineup of people out there, and as soon as you go into that bank and you create your account, the first amount of people are going to get, just a dollar incentive that is going to be automatically put in there. So, a very few select amount of people are going to be getting that $500 or whatever, just automatically for opening an account. That's kind of the way that I'm viewing it.
Yeah, I mean, and let's be clear here. I will jump in LP farms and I'll do that stuff and capture the yield, get out. But in this case, I really like the fact that the USDL is not going to be available except for the people creating the vault. So it's real simple. I mean, if I'm creating a vault, why in the hell would I be selling my USDL out in the open market or trying to give it to somebody else when I could certainly in the first 42 days? Like, why would I be throwing that away? You're unless you just don't know. I mean, like I said, there's going to be human error. It's inevitable. Anything on PulseX that saw people trying to get too cute and got just destroyed, it's going to happen. Once again, know the system, know the tool. That's why we're doing this, guys.
It won't be for lack of trying. We've got hundreds of blogs, all the video. I've jumped on every stream. I answer every Telegram, everything. It won't be from a lack of shooting back.
I hear you. But
the other thing that's just on that note that's kind of cool is this is a bit of sort of some of our goals on USDL. Like, we want that thing to be the stable coin, right? So the Coast guys are doing cool stuff. There's going to be other options, but like, we want USDL to be a major part of liquidity all across the chain. So obviously there's the get in, get your dollar. Hey, there's all these early incentives. I think that stuff's super valuable. Doesn't really change any of the early side, but that more longer term approach, or, when do you want to exit these positions? Now, again, that's all up to you. Financial advice, pricing, tons of variables. But I do think that pair will end up seeing my goal, hope, for how, again, look, one of those successful metrics around LL is like, I want USDBL to be something that moves the needle and really helps, add some of that liquidity and be kind of a fundamental like building block for Pulse Chain. So again, that USDL Pulse pool will hopefully have a silly amount of volume, not just because, we're going to participate in the LP and want the cut, but because that means that USDL liquid loans has really performed well, and then it's offering like a big service to the chain, and having USDL on there will be a big deal. So I think that there's a lot of long-term potential. That would be a goal, the team, and that would be something that we'd want to really have that kind of like service provided on the chain. So I have a lot of aspirations and hopes for that pool being successful because of what it kind of means for the rest of the ecosystem.
Well, I can tell you right now, I'm gonna be putting my my pulse in there, so I'm going to.
Let's go.
Yeah, and I think I wanted to let everybody know as a backdrop. So when WaLLrus talking about Coast, I mean, Coast, you're talking about the Coast for basically the on-ramp and off-ramp system that they're putting into place. Yep. So once again, now you're talking about, Pulse Chain having an on-ramp, an on-off ramp in place where you don't have to go through all these damn jumps we had to do to get in here, where you have to go into a central exchange, or you got to go to a DEX, then you got to transfer to another wallet, then you got to go across the bridge. If you have an on-off ramp directly to your bank, then you can go straight into Pulse Chain. And then, of course, this being the bank, the central exchange, the central bank that could be doing it all. You can see how the ecosystem's starting to form. So yeah, absolutely. Is there going to be a mobile version for this?
That's one of those that we've we've kind of gone back and forth on. The mobile version pulls up; it's nice and clean, so you can use it now. But as far as we have some, what'd you say? We have a pretty high standard, and kind of like we were talking about earlier. It's not meant to be critical or sound like we're like an elitist view. It's just like there, we really do like the team, the whole team, right? Like, I'm the one in front. I end up taking credit for another 24 super smart people. So I tell those guys all the time, hey, I appreciate you guys making me look amazing. Cause like, you guys know I don't code. Like, this stuff is built by people infinitely smarter than me. But like, there is a ton of like romanticism. Like, we love the tech. So some of the things that we're looking at in the future. So the mobile version we have now like works great, but there are like next level things that we're always looking forward to on the DApp. So we are far from done building, designing, and innovating. There's nothing out here in crypto but space and opportunity.
Absolutely. No, I like it. It's awesome. I was curious, and I asked you this question when we were on here last, and that was, because everybody always respects Richard Hart. I mean, he's he created the Pulse chain. He's done what he's done. Are you guys working with his development team at all? Are you guys been building up any partnerships with them and explaining what you guys are bringing to the house? And I know I asked the question, has Richard Hart basically blessed it? Blessed this process? This protocol you guys are putting in place. I asked because I know he had spoken about Alex when he did Hedron and everything. I know Richard has a bigger things to be dealing with in this right now because he's got a lot on his plate, rightfully so. But I just didn't know, like, which kind of, have you guys built up any trust or any relationships with the Richard Hart's development team?
Yeah, so we have a decent relationship with those guys. There's never been too much like, hey, do you guys want to come build on LL? Like it's a separate project, that kind of communication. But like when we were, so like for the analytics, you need an archive node for that. So we had some communications back and forth. Alex, those guys, like those guys have kind of helped with some of the infrastructures. We're playing with different test nets. The guys that work on PulseX, we've spoken to them about contracts and a few different things. So there's that kind of working relationship that us and a lot of the builders have. There's a few chats where the founders and builders get in and work together on different things. So there's that, one band, one sound, but definitely want to be clear that no, that those guys aren't, they're not like participating on our development side. Like, this isn't like secretly an RH project, none of that kind of stuff. So you always want to be really clear there. Well, I'm very, very, yeah, I guess, RH has never been, LL's great, it's awesome. Never said any of that kind of stuff. There's no stamp from those guys, but they're very, very helpful. They've done a lot. We have a good relationship. Very grateful for the, the exchanges when we've needed support or when we could offer support back and forth. Those guys have always been around.
And that's great to hear. I'm glad the partnerships are starting to form, heavy in the Pulse chain ecosystems, because it's just going to create better products overall and sharing that wealth of knowledge and that KT. Yeah. The reason why I was asking, because if you think about liquid loans, it does play into Richard Hart's ultimate, strategy, which is, locking up your coins. Don't try not to do a lot of trading, and basically, what is it? Hold off on your gratification, basically. Try to don't be doing a lot of trading and all, which it might sound like we're talking about all these strategies, doing a lot of trading. Yes, I get the arbitrage, things like that, but ultimately it's not as much as you guys are thinking. A lot of your stuff is still tied up in all those coins. You're just trying to figure out, how do I get yield off of the coins I want to hold on to, and at the same time, being in an environment or protocol that feels safe to me. So that's ultimately what you're trying to do. Like 100%. You don't want to sell, you want to hold, but if I'm going to hold, and I'd like to earn something on it, wouldn't you? So that's pretty much what we're talking about here.
And when we look at these things, even when we talk strategies, I think this is where I think one of the places where I think like very like maxi Hex guys have some communication issues with other people. So a lot of the Hexakin mentality is they from a variety of backgrounds, but had a rough go. That's a lot of the Hex mentality and those early players had a lot of issues. One variation of the other, or maybe Hex was just their golden ticket where they hit well because its price was so strong that they end up being very like concentrated in Hex. So if you go talk to someone who calls himself a Hexakin, if they're a Hexakin OG, a Hex guy, 50% of their portfolio being in crypt and Hex is probably low. A lot of those guys are 60, 70, 80, 90. basically their whole bag or in some variation, right? Now it's a little different now with Pulse and PulseX, but along that way, more so than in most coins, hexagons were very hex centric. Plenty of reasons. Price chart showed that was really cool. Lots of stuff's come out of that. So this isn't critical. It's just like kind of referencing that's where that like mental space is. So when someone says, hey, I'm all in, I'm aping in on whatever thing, or like if a TradFi guy comes and says, man, I'm all in on Tesla. Like that guy doesn't have his life savings in every dime he owns in Tesla. He means he just bought 5% of his portfolio. Maybe. He might have just moved in 3%. Maybe it's 10%, maybe 20 at most, right? But from a lot of the times in our community, when we say we're all in, we didn't mean we put in both feet. We mean we took our pants off and put our pants in too. Like we are heavy in hex, right? So one of the things when we're talking about strategies, and I think this is where some of the times on that communication, when you're looking at like other another influencer making a comment or looking at other projects, I think a lot of times our community goes, all right, well, would they just absolutely shove all the chips in when any of these things we're talking about, LP, any of this stuff, guys, this could be 3% of your bag. You can make a 5%, but I mean, it can be much, much smaller than what kind of our reference point is a lot of times in the community. So that's another one where I think sometimes we get wires crossed when we're not really disagreeing. So if you fall in that more maxi camp for all kinds of positive reasons, if you want to play with any of this stuff, it can be this much. It can be, hey, I'm going to take 10% and go do this thing. I'm going to take 5%. So any of these strategies that we're going through, or we say, hey, we like something or another thing to just kind of, again, for framing for a lot of that kind of, again, hex-centric space is when we say all in, we mean we're heavy, not we're literally all in, like a lot of like hexagon, like sort of that word phrasing may be. So just one of those points of clarity for strategies and buying. I've just seen kind of a lot of our community kind of get that tied up. And I think it just kind of comes from a bit of like starting point. So I think that framing is kind of a big deal as well.
Yeah, and ultimately, kind of what you're talking about there is, I think, is very important. One of the issues that hexagons have had for quite a long time now is that they've only had one coin. Well, now there's a whole lot of them, and there's new things coming out. And there's an entire ecosystem, blah blah blah, and so you're having a problem with all this, right? Well, here's the thing, guys. I mean, if you're all in on Hex and don't care about anything else, this entire ecosystem was started by the grandfather of Hex, and it helps Hex. So just by you putting just a little bit in, exactly as WaLLrus said, you're actually helping Hex technically, and you're growing Hex to become more, helping it evolve to become more than it ever really people would think it ever could have been, right? So just something to kind of point out there.
Yeah, and again, just my last little point on that note is, again, for if you say, hey, the only thing you should do is buy Hex and stake it, cool. I'm not trying to change your mind. But when we're looking at these things, like, to be fair and how we're sitting, so wasn't it really nice to be able to just take your stable coin and just swap it into Hex? Well, somebody was providing LP there, right? So somebody had to be doing something else. Somebody had to build the network and Uniswap. So one of those, you don't even have to touch any of this stuff. Just be aware. And if you're gonna hate, cool. Hate with the perfect hate. Don't hate just because your thing's better. But you can always, you can be a cheerleader for the sideline. There's a lot of cool stuff in the ecosystem that I genuinely think is cool, that I think the team that built it's neat. I just don't have the time, or it's not where I want to allocate stuff in my portfolio. But I'm still supportive because I think it's a good team and a cool piece. There's, I tend to have shorter time horizons on staking and things. I am very long-term thinking, but I'm very sensitive to opportunity cost. That's a little bit of my personality. I tend to be heavier in things. Rather, I don't actually DCA that well. I tend to be like, yeah, I like it. Whack. But again, that's just my mentality, a little my speed, that variation. So we all have preferences, but again, we want to help the ecosystem flourish. And that does not mean you have to buy other people's stuff. Hold what you think is valuable, support stuff you think is cool. And if you want to play. And if not, be supportive of people who are working in the ecosystem if they're good actors.
Absolutely. I got to show some love for all the stuff that I pulled from you guys. So Liquid Loans, there's their website, Jackson that put together those amazing videos, great stuff there, white papers, the docs, the media, everything you need's there. WaLLrus even has a podcast. I recommend you guys hitting that up too. He's done some great interviews. There's so much information there. So obviously we've spent we're going on pushing almost 3 hours now on this what we put together. But I felt like we did a pretty good deep dive here. WaLLrus, hope we basically pulled together this information, and hopefully it was good, opportunity for you to kind of talk on liquid loans and kind of clear up any gray areas that we may have presented. But so much information to dive into, but laid out. But I felt like we beat it up pretty good. I don't know, what's your thoughts, man?
Oh, I love it, man. I always appreciate the invitation. These are things, again, there's a ton here. So I always like to recommend for people too that, bite off whatever it was that was interesting, and then you can go and kind of deep dive and work through it. So, take it as an overview, take out the pieces you really like and enjoy, work through it. And yeah, I definitely appreciate you guys. Spent a lot of time. I don't know, for everybody else who doesn't create content, this stuff is not quick. I mean, these guys got to reach out. They've got to schedule stuff with me. Hopefully I'll show up on time from now on. And, but to get all that stuff pulled together and to have the questions you guys have, that stuff takes a lot of time. So I really appreciate it. This kind of stuff's easier for me because I don't like sitting here talking to a rectangle. I'm not an influencer. I don't do that stuff. I don't hang on Instagram. So working through this stuff with you guys it gets the best out of me. So it's an absolute pleasure. Appreciate the invitation, and I love y'all.
Appreciate
for sure.
Appreciate it. All right, so obviously everybody's going to be out there looking for October. Keep your eyes open. October seems to be a lot of things are going to be dropping here. So if you're interested in liquid loans, I would recommend you do your research, figure this out, get exposed to it, go through the tour, understand how to use the interface, at least go through the tour. Good Lord, go through the tour. Understand what your risk level is going to be. I would recommend starting to get, not financial advice, but for me personally, I'd be go ahead and getting your pulse ready, go ahead and get your strategies ready, what you're going to feel comfortable with, because when this thing launches, the last thing you want to be doing is stumbling around, figuring, okay, what do I do now? What do I have to do? You're going to figure this out. You do not want to go in this thing cold. If anything, just go look at the nightmare stories I heard. And I don't think there's going to be nightmare stories here with liquid loans, but I'm just giving a caveat. When Pulse Chain launched, there was people tripping up, and there was nightmare stories that were going on because people did not know what they were doing. Do not be one of those people. So do your due diligence and get ready for liquid loans, because October is definitely going to be liquid loans month. That's for sure. All right, guys, I appreciate it. Nate, thanks for driving everything. Guys, we look forward to maybe we'll do another follow-up once Liquid Loans launches, and we'll try to maybe pull together some information of interesting things we're starting to see. We'll have a follow-up. But till then, everybody, thank you so much for joining. Take care.
For sure. And then just before we leave, go ahead, join our Telegram chat. WaLLrus is actually in there. You can ask him some questions specifically that you have. But at the same time, yeah, we've been talking about these things. Tracker has already been kind of dropping some hints on his very specific stuff. And when Tracker says, try and figure out what you're going to do before it launches and get your stuff ready, he's not kidding. Like when Pulse Chain launched, I took 10 minutes and got over 40 plus transactions done. And then all of a sudden the bridge got clogged. I got my stuff through, and it was just trying to help everyone else, and I'm okay with all the transactions that I made. I mean, I've already got my Pulse sitting on the sidelines right now because I'm planning on doing the same sort of thing, but it's like, you don't want to get too stressed out about things. And so have a plan. And then even if it's like you are getting stressed, stick to your plan. Just keep things peaceful, man. So, all right. Yeah, we are good to go. Thank you very much for joining us here. WaLLrus, I got to thank you again, man. It's always great having you on. You got a lot up here, man. That's for sure. So, all right. Well, we're going to go ahead and head out. Hey, you have yourselves a good one. And again, join that Telegram link. We're here to help you.